Good morning all. Welcome to this WAMM online workshop. Hopefully you can hear me okay and see the presentation okay. My name's Rob Collins. I work for the Rivers Trust. I'm heavily involved in the catchment-based approach, and I'm also the project manager for WAMM. In a moment, I'll kick off with a brief introduction of the project with some rationale behind it. But before I do, a few logistical issues to help with smooth running for the day. Firstly, whilst the presentations are ongoing, could you please turn off your cameras and your mics? You'll notice in the agenda that we have, after each block of presentations, 10 minutes or so for questions and answers and discussions as well. And during those periods, if you want to ask a question, if you could flag that in the chat, or if you want to ask the question verbally, as it were, rather than just written, please do so. But if you could share your camera, and anyone on the team who's just presented, if you could also share your cameras when you reply. And that way, at least we get to see a few faces throughout the day, and we don't not all sort of feel as though we're stuck in cyberspace. We've got quite a few of the presentations today have been recorded. We have got a few live ones, obviously this one, but we felt it best for the smooth running of the day to record quite a number of them. We didn't want to take a chance on variable connections and having to lose time sharing screens and so on. So, just to also say, one or two of you signed up and joined the call today using a mobile number or some means where we're not quite clear who you are. And the breakout sessions this afternoon, it'd be really good if you could rejoin at some point using putting in your first name and your last name as well. We need that information. So thanks for that. And just finally, to let you know, everything we discussed today, this will be recorded the whole day, but also all the presentations and the various links and so on, and all the contact details of the key people in the team will be circulated in due course. So we'll pass all that on at some point soon. So that's enough about the logistics. We'll move on to this very brief introduction I'm going to give, and thereafter on to various presentations from the southwest and northwest regions. Just to let you know, if you weren't already aware, that this online workshop replaces two face-to-face workshops we hope to have held in Exeter and Chester respectively back in April and May, hence a focus on the west of the UK here. If you're not already aware, WAMM stands for the Wholescape Approach to Marine Management, and the project's funded through the MFF, through the Marine Management Organisation, so we're very grateful to them for that support. It's originally was perceived as a 2-year project, but in fact, for one reason or another, we ended up with having to do the project in about 1.25 years, in fact less, about 1 year, well, around that. And in fact, we are due to finish at the end of October, so just a few weeks to go. And as always with these sorts of projects, it's just when you feel that you're really getting somewhere and getting up ahead of steam that you have to stop. But hopefully, as you'll see through the day, we feel as though we've sown a few seeds for growth and to leave something of a legacy with the project. So what was the rationale behind WAMM? Well, several reasons really, but they probably boil down to two key challenges that we wanted to begin to address. Firstly, there are many knowledge gaps with respect to our understanding of estuarine and coastal waters, particularly around the status, their pressures and the impacts. So, for example, if you take the issue of emerging contaminants, so pharmaceuticals, personal care products, microplastics as well. How much do we know about the levels of these chemicals and their impacts, not only in the water column, but on sediment and biota too? So some real knowledge gaps there. And that applies to plenty of other issues too. And then perhaps the bigger, broader issue that we really saw that needed addressing, and that is that work in estuarine and coastal waters has been historically really disconnected from that undertaken in terrestrial and freshwater catchments. And yet, of course, we know there's an intricate link between the two. So much of the pollution that you see in coastal and estuarine waters is derived from further up the catchment. And I guess perhaps this is understandable in a way, and to really tackle this issue in an integrated way requires large, well-funded, long-term and holistic projects, and you just don't get those nowadays. So our two broad objectives under WAMM were to begin to try and address these two challenges. So on this issue of greater integration, what we've really tried to do is to drive a more collaborative and closer working model between the coastal partnerships, who have been long established, and the catchment-based approach, or CABA partnerships, that have been running. There's about 106 of them around river catchment partnerships around the country now, across England anyway, cross border with Wales, and they've been running 6 or 7 years now. So our first and underpinning objective really has been to drive a closer working model between the two, and hence help to begin to improve integration across this land-sea interface. And also, albeit in a small way, to begin to improve understanding of the state of the estuarine and coastal waters. And you'll hear later on this morning about the pilot we have in Morecambe Bay. Those of us who have been involved in CABA have understood and seen an evolution slowly over the last 6 or 7 years in terms of collaboration. I'm not suggesting it's been necessarily an easy journey, and we're certainly not there yet, but some of the better CABA partnerships are beginning to show the real benefits of collaboration. So pooling of expertise and data and local knowledge, gaining access to a wider range of key stakeholders, and in quite a few cases now, through working together, managing to secure funds for larger, more holistic projects that bring multiple benefits. And so that was a sort of model we want to begin to introduce to this engagement between the coastal and the CABA partnerships, and in fact other key stakeholders too. The Morecambe Bay pilot within the project, I don't want to dwell on this. We've got a good session on this later this morning. You'll hear from all the partners involved, but basically it's kind of a microcosm of the wider project, in that we're looking to drive, have been looking to drive greater collaboration, a closer working model, and to begin to undertake work on the ground to improve understanding of the state of the coastal and estuarine, and in fact the freshwater component of Morecambe Bay. A lot of the support we've provided under WAMM is underpinned by robust data and evidence. We see this as being really critical, and that's something we've learned through CABA as well. So you'll hear later this morning about the development of the Coastal Data Explorer, the online data package, and various shared information platforms too. But just to flag too that we've also undertaken some sort of basic level mapping too that had yet to be done. So we've got a map now of locating all of the CABA partnerships and the coastal partnerships across the country. And you can see that map there, the lower one on the screen here, showing all those partnerships for the southwest region. And so we found early on, we did a bit of an intelligence early on in the project and found that we really needed to do some of this basic mapping, because we found often that coastal and CABA partnerships were sometimes only vaguely aware of each other's existence, certainly not aware of what each other were doing. So that map's available, and let us know if you're interested in getting some PDF versions of it. We've also recently captured the key policy and legislation relating to coastal and estuarine waters and the freshwater environment too. The whole thing links together, hence the Wholescape term. within a story map. So we're not trying to sort of capture every single little bit of information here, but we've got the broad issues. So WFD, the Marine Framework Directive, 25-year Environment Plan, and so on. So hopefully you'll find that of use and of value. You can find it under that link there. We've got a lot of WAMM material held on the Catchment-based approach website. So you'll find this story map there as well. It's been an interesting time to put together this story map, because of course we're living in uncertain times with respect to where we go with some of the European directives over the coming years. But nevertheless, it's hopefully a valuable source of information. And in there you'll see a few lines that flag the importance of local data. So the point we want to make is that, you know, regulatory data sets will always have a role to play, but increasingly they're hit by resource constraints and limited in both time and space. And so local data derived from coastal partnerships, CABA partnerships, whoever, is of real value and is going to be of increasing values into the future. So, you know, that's a real key point alongside all the standing policy and legislation too. And just finally, we have a work stream, a really important work stream on the project around developing a framework for collaborative delivery in the coastal and estuarine environment. So Natasha Bradshaw leads on this, and much of this afternoon's workshop will be dedicated to this. So we've been working with both the coastal and the CABA partnerships to understand both the opportunities and challenges they see to closer working. And long term, the plan is, or mid-term, the plan is to develop a model for partnership working. So to provide a framework or roadmap that'll provide for a longer term legacy for the project. So that's all I want to say by introduction. It gives you a brief overview, hopefully. If you've got any broader questions around the project, you can put them on the chat later today, or just contact me directly via my email there. So I'm going to pass over now to Natasha. We've got a big block of presentations now, starting with those from Southwest Partnerships, followed by a quick discussion around those, and then followed on by the Northwest Partnerships as well. We found that the earlier workshops we ran in both London and York, this was really useful for everyone to hear about what's going on the ground. So I'll hand over now to Natasha.
Thank you, Rob, and good morning, everyone. Nick is going to share his screen for our joint presentation to introduce the Southwest presentations. Nick, do you want to just briefly introduce yourself first? Okay, maybe whilst he's sorting the screen share, I'll just introduce myself.
Yes, no, that's right. I can't multitask.
It's okay.
Right. So what? First things first. Just check that is that working?
Yeah. We can see your screen.
Okay. Why did it? Okay. Right. Yes. Good. Hello. Technical issues. Yeah. So I'm Nick Paling. I think most people from the Southwest certainly will know of me in various ways. I work for West Country Rivers Trust, and I have teamed up with Natasha to help with this overview introductory presentation.
Okay, good morning, I'm Natasha. I'm an independent researcher on this project for the Rivers Trust. I live in the Southwest and have worked for 3 of the estuary partnerships in the region. I just wanted to start by asking you to reflect on what we mean by wholescape, because this is a term that has evolved sort of gradually over the last 5 years. And we're thinking about it in terms of a holistic approach which encourages upstream and downstream thinking to deal with environmental challenges across the freshwater and marine environment, and recognising that partnership working works, which we have an enormous amount of expertise here today to kind of celebrate how partnership working does work and how we can make even more of it. So this session will focus on the South West River Basin District, but we acknowledge we have some participants here today from our neighbouring River Basin District regions in the South East, with participants from Dorset and Hampshire, the Thames, which actually starts in the Greater South West, and of course the Severn is Britain's largest estuary and catchment, with several catchment partnerships from the Severn here today, and I'm a trustee for the Severn Rivers Trust. So that's good. And also as an MMO appointee on the Devon and Severn IFCA, I personally feel that I have a really kind of wholescape mentality. So it's been a joy to work on this project and start looking really constructively about how we can kind of put that into practice much more strongly. So to introduce the Wholescape's approach to marine management in the South West, Nick's going to start from an upstream and catchment perspective.
Okay. So just a quick introduction to the South West River Basin District from me, really. It doesn't really need to be pointed out because it's so obvious how important the transitional and coastal waters, marine environments are, and the coastal strip are to the West Country, to the South West River Basin District. All of the management catchments that you can see have significant coastal, estuarine and marine areas that are and issues, challenges which we face on a daily basis. I think for me, I was involved in some of the workshops relating to the Wholescapes approach, and I think that for me, we've always tried to take a Wholescapes approach in our catchment management work, so from source to sea and even further than that. I think that goes without saying across probably all of the catchment partnerships as well in the South West River Basin District. You know, just to emphasise how diverse and significant and how important it is that we connect our catchment management work to the coastal environment. You know, is in the Southwest. You know, just in the Southwest Water area, which is just sort of at the western half of this map. You know, 674 miles of coastline. Tourism in the Southwest is worth estimated to be worth £11 billion. The population of the Southwest goes up by 60% in summer, and in some places like Kingsbridge, it goes up by four times. You know, that creates huge challenges for the coastal environment. We've got small streams that go out across bathing waters. We've got 150 of the 420 odd bathing waters in England. Big challenges in the past. You know, in the late 80s, only 40 to 50% of our bathing waters met the standard. Then South West Water instigated Clean Sweep, which was £2 billion worth of investment, and now we're at about 97–98% compliance in bathing waters. So we've been on a long journey of estuaries and marine coastal management over the decades. Coastal flooding, wave action issues. We've got critical infrastructure in the coastal zone. You know, everyone that knows about what happened at Dawlish when the main line was compromised. And you know, bathing water is just a tiny part of it. We've got extreme flooding at Coverack. Millbrook, Mousel's had its issues, so there is a huge array of challenges, and I think that makes the Southwest absolutely perfect for this Wholescapes approach, taking a catchment management approach, but also completely extending that out into the transitional and coastal waters. So I think it's a timely project. It's incredibly important. I think what you'll find out during this morning, particularly, is that there is a huge amount of really excellent work going on in catchment management world, but connecting it now to the marine and coastal estuarine situation as well. So a lot's been done, but a lot more coming as well.
Okay, thanks, Nick. So the Southwest Coast. Yeah, thanks. The Southwest Coast, as Nick has said, one of the, I think the longest distance coastal footpath, worth a lot to the economy. The open coast, very well known in many ways, and beaches that contrast wilderness and overcrowding, which we've seen a lot of this summer. The estuaries are perhaps a bit less well known further afield, but are a major feature of the southwest, particularly in Devon with so many estuaries. Lots of small estuaries, particularly in South Devon, the Tean, the Avon, and in North Devon and Cornwall, Tortoridge, Camel. And the massive Severn Estuary Bristol Channel, which, although the Severn River Basin District goes up to the Midlands and North Wales, at least half of the estuarine and marine part of the Severn is the north coast of the southwest, so that's a major factor. And that hugely dynamic wilderness juxtaposed with some major urban areas, Bristol, Cardiff, Newport and Gloucester, the real contrasting environment. And most estuaries have rivers flowing into them, but not all, with the exception of Rears of Salcombe Kingsbridge and Devon and the Foul Health in Cornwall. So open wild coastlines and busy beaches, muddy estuaries. And perhaps what's less well known, even less well known than the estuaries, is the beautiful marine life, often hidden to most people, but affected by our actions. So all the catchment partnerships in the southwest have a coastal estuarine component, but there isn't a coastal partnership for every catchment or river or even stream. Okay, so on to the next slide, Nick, which shows us where the coastal partnerships are. There are 9 active coastal partnerships in the region, although the definition of active is not always easy to define. Some are not as active as they used to be. So in Devon, we have a long legacy of estuary partnerships supported by Devon County Council and other partners. AONBs in North and South Devon have taken a lead role for some of the smaller estuary partnerships in particular. In Cornwall, we had, I think, more activity with the Camel and Fowl, particularly hosted by harbour authorities, but they're still kind of around. In Somerset, the Severn Estuary Partnership is focusing on beach quality, but is hosted in Wales at Cardiff University. But their recent Litter-Free Coast and Sea Somerset initiative has been great kind of activity for the Severn Estuary Partnership in South West England. And then the Dorset Coast Forum, one of the longest standing coastal partnerships and very active, hosted by Dorset County Council, and was the first area in England to trial marine planning. So these coastal partnerships have a really big variety of host bodies and different characters in the partnership offices. Many are hosted by local authorities, one at a university, and several have had more active hosts in harbour authorities. Cornwall Council has taken a leading role through its maritime strategy, and the Devon Maritime Forum also reflects more awareness offshore. So let's do some upstream thinking and consider how these coastal partnerships link with the catchments. So back to Nick from West Country Rivers.
Okay, so just a quick whistle-stop tour from me to give an overview of the catchment partnerships across the southwest. Very, very quickly in summary, so Cornwall, they made the decision very early on in the evolution of catchment-based approach to combine the 2 management catchments across the majority of Cornwall into one area. It's hosted by Cornwall Wildlife Trust, and someone called Mark Summers does a fantastic job of knitting all that together, has a very strong working relationship with the catchment coordinator. And obvious, you can't deliver anything in Cornwall without thinking about the coast. Although it's worth pointing out that we're not going to hear from Cornwall. It's probably the only Southwest Catchment Partnership we're not going to hear from in the talks that follow. But it's definitely, they're doing some fantastic work, particularly in small coastal communities. Tamar is hosted by ourselves, West Country Rivers Trust. We've been around for a while in that catchment partnership. We've reinvented ourselves several times, but we've always had an ambition to work down at the bottom of the Tamar catchment. That's where Plymouth is, but obviously, world-class estuary, Tamar Estuary, Plymouth Sound, and loads of really interesting coastal communities, such as Millbrook, to work in. South Devon is co-hosted by ourselves in South Devon AONB, and you're going to hear from Nigel about all the fantastic work that he does on the estuary forums and groups. So I won't say too much more about that. Obviously, the South Devon Catchment Partnership having 7 major estuaries means that there's plenty to work on there. North Devon, hosted by Devon Wildlife Trust, again, a very closely integrated with the North Devon biosphere. They've got at least one sensational estuary in the Tortorridge estuary at Barnstaple, and again, lots of very interesting work going on up there, particularly in relation to the Pioneer estuaries. Pioneer. East Devon, hosted by Devon Wildlife Trust, supported by a whole raft of other people. They've achieved huge things recently in terms of connecting the Colne, which is a flagship project in East Devon, but also, as I understand, I think we'll hear from Ed over the next few minutes about their increasing focus on the coastal estuary environment. Obviously, the ex-estuary is of great importance, but I know that Devon Wildlife Trust have done a lot of work on the Axe estuary, so that's very, very positive. And then you move further to the east. The Dorset situation is hosted by Dorset Wildlife Trust. Get away from, and again, my internet connection is now telling me I'm unstable, which is not new news. And then obviously Somerset and the very interesting coast relating to the Severn estuary up there, and you're going to hear more from James Maben about the work that Somerset are doing. And then for us it moves, but it's still the West Country, Bristol Avon, and further across into Hampshire. Then obviously there's great work going on in those catchment partnerships as well. So it's a work in progress, I think, and I'm very excited to hear the presentations that are going to be given next, because I think it will really show that the catchment partnerships in the Southwest are really answering the challenge of taking a wholescapes approach and genuinely bringing estuaries and coastal environments into their dialogue about their catchment management processes. So back to Natasha, I think.
Okay, thank you very much, Nick. So final slide, this is shows full coverage of catchment partnerships and where they link to coastal partnerships across the Southwest. You can see a high number of coastal partnerships in Devon, which reflect the number of estuaries compared to Cornwall and Somerset. But there are some gaps and various initiatives on the ground that are not necessarily shown on this map. And the overall maritime strategy for Cornwall. And legacy of some more active coastal partnership activity in Cornwall that's also not shown. But this is new knowledge from the WAMM project, just to literally produce these maps, as Rob said. So we have these full UK coverage as part of the outputs of this project. So now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce the speakers, just to kind of deep dive a bit into hearing how a few of the catchment partnerships and coastal partnerships work together, or are starting to work together. Nigel Morton from the South Devon A&B Estuaries Partnership. He oversees 5 estuary fora and already works with a collaborative catchment coast group. Will kick off. The recording will then go naturally on to Ed Parr-Farris, who leads the East Devon Catchment Partnership, and a formative coastal and marine group with the Ex-Estuary Partnership. And then James Maben, who leads the Somerset Catchment Partnership and a project linking upstream work to bathing waters with the Severn Estuary Partnership. And then finally, Kaya Curry, who links Devon Cornwall across the Tamar Estuaries and Catchment. So Lucy will start the recording now for those 4 5-minute presentations. And then I'll come back in at the end for a short Q&A session before we move on to the Northwest. Okay, see you later.
Hi, I'm Nigel Mortimer. I'm the Estuaries Officer for South Devon Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty Estuaries Partnership. As our strapline would suggest, my work is very much about conserving our estuaries through greater active respect and understanding, and encouraging their sustainable use and enjoyment. I am now part of the South Devon AOMB team. As you can see, the protected landscape of our AOMB is very much defined by the waterscape of our 5 estuaries and coast. As anyone that knows about estuaries will tell you, they are all unique. All of our estuaries now contain some level of marine protected area, from marine triple SI to marine conservation zone, and most of our coasts too. Our estuaries are very much influenced and part of the rivers that normally flow into them. the Salk and Kingsbridge estuary being a bit of an oddity with no river flowing into it. But of course, they are also more or less influenced by the ebb and flow of their tidal coastal seawaters. For me, it is this ever-changing salinity and the exposure to the tides that makes them so special. Ecology is never simple, but relative to estuarine ecology, freshwater ecology with its one-way flow is a bit easier. Just as our estuaries are heavily impacted by the health and water quality of the rivers that flow into them, and that of our streams that make up our rivers, etc., so the health of our coastal waters can be heavily influenced by that of our estuaries, and to a greater or less extent, vice versa. This is hardly rocket science, although equally predictable. Most people still don't get this connection between how they treat their waters in their homes, work and play, and the quality of the waters that they will then meet down on the beach. And with our growing realization of the many significant ecosystem services that our waters play, this really matters. Our estuary conservation work has always been conscious of the catchment water's influence on their health, and there are many reasons why we have historically tended to prioritise and concentrate our efforts towards our actual estuarine waters and their immediate adjacent communities. So when the catchment-based approach started to be discussed, it was a real no-brainer not to be involved, or rather my A&B manager did. But you know how these things go, just call me Aquaman. It wasn't long before I became heavily involved as well. And I have to mention that it wasn't like we were quiet. We do have a form of local community estuary management stakeholder forum for 4 of our estuaries already. In 2013, we formed the South Devon Catchments Partnership that we formally now co-host with the West Country Rivers Trust in close liaison with our local EA catchment coordinator. And now we have a core management group that includes the Dartmoor National Park that manage several of our catchment headwaters and the Devon Wildlife Trust that operate over the wider area. The South Devon Catchments Partnership brings together the missing stakeholders from our estuary catchments. There has been some discussion about bringing them all more closely together, but I do feel that our different members have different salinities of interest and local ownership. And I'm very conscious that we could head upstream of some current and future important coastal marine interests. Not that we could ever keep everyone happy all of the time anyway. Obviously, the freshwater catchment areas are much larger and include a lot more households, landowners and industries, so engagement is that much more challenging and often outside our usual borders of responsibility. But of course we do try. One of our more successful projects, and I may be biased on this, was the production of our animation, The Drip. Getting across the concept of water catchments and our water quality footprint on the waters entering our coast is complicated, but we think we've done a pretty good job on that story. We just need to be a bit cleverer in getting it seen by everyone. Now though, I just want to do others, one interpreting the concept of cumulative impacts, negative and indeed positive, and one on some of the more challenging aspects of estuarine ecology. Any funding offers or questions?
Hello everyone, my name's Ed Parr-Ferris. I'm Conservation Manager at Devon Wildlife Trust, and I also host East Devon Catchment Partnership, along with our partners West Country Rivers Trust, who co-host. The East Devon Catchment Partnership covers an area of about just over 2,000 square kilometres, which I think is probably pretty normal for a catchment partnership. We have quite an active partnership with a huge range of partners, but you'll see there from the list that many of them are terrestrial focused or freshwater focused, and we only have one partner who is really marine focused, and that's the Estuary Management Partnership, something we wanted to look to address. State of the rivers in the East Devon Catchment Partnership area is pretty poor. We've got about 1,000 kilometres of rivers in East Devon. only about 100 or so kilometres are in good condition, so only 10%. So we want to look to improve that. A large part of the problem in East Devon is the vulnerable soils that we have, the sands and the clays, very complex mixtures, and the intensive agriculture that goes on those soils, leading to these sorts of problems that you can see here. The Catchment Partnership's been busy working with farmers on the ground for many years on different projects, getting down onto farms, giving them advice on specific ways of working, but also providing literature and guidance documents like the Soils and Natural Flood Management document here. The partnership also has developed many projects and increasingly looking at natural processes. We're planting trees in floodplains and the likes, putting in woody dams to slow the flow, looking at sustainable soils management and wetland creation, all trying to slow that water going down the catchment and improve the water quality reaching the end point. We also have catchment scale projects. Many of you will have heard of the River Otter Beaver Trial that was recently granted permission for the beavers to stay. That's working on the River Otter, and in the neighbouring catchment in the River Culm, we have a project called Connecting the Culm, which works throughout this catchment from the headwaters in the Blackdown Hills AOMB, looking to recreate springline mires and upland habitats like that, through looking at development issues around the Culm Garden Village, and then floodplain reconnection and mitigation down near where it meets the Exe. We have other projects through the Upstream Thinking programme of South West Water, working on the Exe and the Otter, and coming up on the Axe. We're looking at further projects on the Axe and the Clist as well. So we often mention the impacts in the marine world coming from the various activities on land, so things like sediment and physical modification, whether it's nutrients or chemicals. And we talk about this quite often when we're doing the application process, but we don't really bring that fully into the project or fully into our discussions even. And really we should do, because we've got some amazing estuaries in our patch. So the Exe is a Ramsar site. It's an SPA and a SSSI. And both the Axe and the Otter have got marine conservation zones on them now, just recently, and SSSIs and SACs associated with them as well. And just in our inshore waters, we have an incredible marine environment, with a third of those waters being designated as SAC through the Lyme Bay SAC. And we really want to look at how can we do more to look after this amazing environment. We all want our communities to be able to engage with, you know, the issues that they want to bring to us. We want them to be able to solve their problems, and we want to help them to do that. That's sort of the role of the Catchment Partnership. But we also want to include marine audiences in that, who are impacted by activities sometimes quite a long way away on the land, and perhaps they don't know how to. So we want to try and engage them and help them to do that. So to try and sort that out, we want to set up a marine group for our Catchment Partnership, who will meet like this, or probably more likely like this, virtually for the time being, and feed into the main partnership. We recognise that we can't necessarily bring both audiences together at the minute, but I think that'd be a big ask of people to attend both meetings, and also maybe not of interest to a lot of people to go to both things. So, but if we can feed into the decision making of the main partnership, that'd be really valuable. Hopefully it'd result in more integrated projects, where the problems at the top and the bottom of the catchment are really working together a bit more, and we're addressing those issues a bit better. But also we want to, I think I've covered up the word literacy there, we want to increase ocean literacy in our partnership, both with those who attend, but also those in their wider organisations. In addition, through the WAMM project, we want to be able to offer workshops to engage wider stakeholders in the catchment, see how we can better understand those barriers and the opportunities that come from integrating better with the marine environment, but also use the right language on both sides to help reach and engage those audiences if they want to, and we don't even know yet if they do want to. But that's our goal, and thanks for listening. And yeah, I hope you have an interesting day. Okay, all the best.
Good morning everyone, and thank you for the invitation to talk to you today about Somerset Catchment Partnership. I'm James Maben, and I'm the Partnership Coordinator. In this presentation, I'm going to give you a brief overview of the partnership's work an example of how we are beginning to develop a collaborative catchment to coast approach with our neighbouring 7 estuary partnership to try and tackle a shared water quality issue. Firstly, I'm going to briefly set the scene in terms of Somerset and the 2,800 square kilometre area the Catchment Partnership covers. The partnership is hosted by FWAG Southwest and funded by the Environment Agency and Wessex Water, and we have an active steering group involving around 20 partner organisations, all working together under the CaBA umbrella. Somerset is a diverse county, and the partnership area includes parts of Exmoor National Park, the Quantock Hills, Blackdown Hills and Mendip Hills, areas of outstanding natural beauty, as well as the Somerset Levels and Moors and around 70 kilometres of the Somerset coastline. This coastline includes 9 designated bathing waters shown on the map by the green dots. A priority area of focus for the partnership in recent years has been the Brew catchment, shown here with the red dotted line. The catchment includes the towns of Glastonbury and Burnham-on-Sea and a large part of the Somerset Levels and Moors. The catchment faces some significant challenges, with 96% of water bodies classified as either moderate or poor, both overall and for ecological status under the Water Framework Directive. The catchment is an Environment Agency priority catchment, and over the last 18 months, Somerset Catchment Partnership has worked to develop the Brew Catchment Action Plan as a mechanism to bring together partners and ensure more joined-up delivery to address the main issues. A key issue is the loss of bathing water status at Burnham Jetty, shown here by the red dot. As mentioned in the last slide, the Brew catchment faces a multitude of challenges as a result of complex water management and varied farming practices. A simplified summary of the issues includes multiple water quality failures, predominantly from high phosphate levels, multiple fish migration barriers from heavily modified watercourses, with low flows often causing fish kills. The Somerset Levels and Moors and coastline is one of the UK's most climate change vulnerable areas, with increased risk from sea level rise, river flooding and drought. Changing land use, including the loss of grassland and increased soil loss due to an increase in maize cultivation, particularly for intensive dairy farming and anaerobic digesters. And as a result of all this, Ramsar sites and SSSIs on the Somerset Levels and Moors are failing to meet the standards due to low water levels and high nutrient inputs. There has also historically been a lack of joined-up delivery from partners, and Somerset Catchment Partnership is keen to try and change this. And finally, as previously mentioned, despite a £39 million Wessex Water investment into sewerage infrastructure and assets, Burnham Jetty has lost its bathing water status after being classified as poor for 5 consecutive years. It's a complicated issue, exacerbated by the fact the beach sits at the mouth of 2 large rivers, which greatly influence the bathing water quality. Despite the huge investment, little has changed in terms of the water quality, and so the finger now strongly points to diffuse agricultural pollution from higher in the catchment as the main source of the problem. The Burnham-on-Sea bathing water problem is an issue affecting both Somerset Catchment Partnership and 7 Estuary Partnership, and blurs the boundary between the two. There is potential for duplication of effort as both partnerships develop projects and initiatives to try and tackle the issue. It's still early days, but 2020 has seen much closer working between our 2 partnerships on the shared issue in an attempt to influence key stakeholders and ensure there is continued focus and sufficient investment to find long-term solutions. COVID restrictions have helped in this process by removing geographical barriers as we have switched to video meetings. This has included organising and attending joint stakeholder and partnership meetings to try and influence ongoing investment into finding solutions. There is no easy fix, but we hope that this collaborative approach will help identify some long-term actions and solutions. Thank you for listening.
Hello there, my name's Kaya Curry, and I work for Plymouth City Council as a Natural Infrastructure Officer, but also as the Tamar Estuaries Consultative Forum Coordinator, which is what I'm going to talk to you today about. I've been asked to talk for 5 minutes about TECF, Plymouth Sound and Tamar Estuaries, and how we move towards the WAMM approach. So TECF is a traditional MPA, Marine Protected Area Partnership. It was set up some years ago, and it's actually probably one of the oldest in the country, actually, partnership to manage the Marine Protected Area. And as such, it focuses on the Tamar Estuaries complex SPA, which is there for mudflats and salt marshes and particularly for the migratory birds that they support, such as little egrets, and also for the Plymouth Sound and Estuaries SAC, Special Area of Conservation, which is there for things like the rocky reefs and the seagrass beds and the like, in terms of the subtidal habitats that we have. TechF is managed collaboratively by all the competent authorities who collectively fund the TechF partnership and provide for a member of staff, most of me, if you like. And the partners consist of the 5 local authorities, so all of the Plymouth City Council, the local and the district councils and county councils, or unitaries for Cornwall and Devon. Also the 4 harbour authorities, including the MOD, QHM, who chairs the partnership, as well as other competent authorities such as the IFCAs, the Environment Agency, Natural England, MMO, and other partners as well, including the Duchy. So we have taken the traditional approach of, producing the Tamar Estuaries Management Plan periodically, which is focused on key activities that need to be managed in order to safeguard those features, those designated features that I spoke about a minute ago. And the activities that we focused on traditionally have been things like fisheries, recreational management, water quality, dredging, navigation, and so on. But there has been an increasing awareness that we need to look upstream as well, and some of the things that we're managing for down at the bottom have actually come from further up, such as the historic mining waste, which is getting locked in terms of contaminated sediments, is being locked into the sediments, which then the harbour authorities have to deal with. Also plastic pollution, which is some of it which is emanating from further upstream, which again is manifesting itself down within the European Marine Site, and this is then impacting on things like the seagrass bed. I've put the slide for remedies in because that's a European funded project which is managing seagrass beds and looking at how we can restore them, and part of the reason that we have to do that is because of water quality changes and sedimentation, which is potentially impacting on that feature. So we're delighted with the Tamar catchment-based approach, because this is a way of addressing that, if you like, that upstream thinking, downstream actions, or whatever you want to call it. We are working with the second phase of the catchment-based approach, which is hosted and run by the West Country Rivers Trust, and we're on the steering group alongside the other key organisations, which is the Tamar Valley AOMB Service, Dartmoor National Park Authority, the Environment Agency, and ourselves. We're forming the steering group, but naturally we are bringing in all the tens of other local organisations and groups which form the wider partnership as well, so a lot of members, and that really reflects the diversity of the area. You can see on the map how big that Tamar catchment area is, stretching all the way from the south coast virtually all the way up to North Devon and Cornwall coast. Massive area, with all the water falling in that area ultimately flowing down the Tamar and coming out past Plymouth. Huge area. So in terms of challenges and opportunities, well, I'm going to try and be very brief about this. Firstly, I'm sure that you're all aware that water quality is not getting any better. There's been lots of press recently, in fact, how it's getting worse and how we are continuing to fail. So we really have to up our game, first challenge. Second challenge is about keeping it simple. It can get incredibly complex if you look at all the relationships and the systems that are working. So it's vital that we keep it as simple as possible and don't overcomplicate things. And the third challenge, I think, is that we use it to deliver new and innovative ways of tackling some of these bigger problems that we have not managed to address up to now. In terms of opportunities, there's plenty of those, I think. Stronger collaborative working with a shared learning environment is critical, that we create that to share best practice. And some of the areas that we're doing that, for example, around recreational management, whilst balancing disturbance, and also how we remove plastic pollution from all parts of the watercourse. Second one is around better data sharing, to use data to drive and communicate change, and using the Catchment Data Explorer, for example, and other platforms to ensure that that data also engages with key stakeholders and delivers real change. And thirdly, it's about cross-cutting projects. and how we deliver benefits both up and downstream, such as habitat creation. For example, there's some great work being done around Calstock with the Environment Agency and Cornwall Council and other partners where new habitat creation is being carried out for reed beds and salt marsh habitats. So terrific challenges, terrific opportunities that can be met through CABA. Finally, that's me done. Hope I've stuck to time almost. Any questions? There's my email address. Do get in touch. Otherwise, thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you very much to Nigel, Ed, James and Kaya for those lovely presentations that give us a great start to the day and an insight to Catchment and Coastal Partnership collaboration across the Southwest. Could I ask the speakers to turn on their videos, please? Also Nick, if you're still there, and Rob as the overall chair. I'm aware we're running a little bit late, but I hope we can have 5 minutes now for any kind of burning questions and answers to those speakers. So we had one question to Ed from Rob. Did you want to verbalise that, Rob?
I can do very quickly. I mean, Ed answered it very well. I was just looking at those photos of the soil erosion. There's some, serious issues there, and I assume there'd be some issues therefore downstream and the estuaries in terms of dredging and the cost of dredging and so on. It seemed, as Ed and in fact Alan has also flagged in the chat that perhaps there's not enough integration. Well, there clearly isn't enough integration between CABA and coastal partnerships, and these sorts of issues are probably a good place to start.
I think it's fair to say that many of the coastal partnerships have traditionally looked more offshore than upstream, and I guess that's maybe something to think about through the day as to whether that's a fair generalisation or not.
I was just going to come in and just say, just to sort of, in case anybody didn't notice the chat was, it's something that has been raised directly by Estuary Partnership, and we've also got the Exeter Ship Canal and the likes that suffers from sedimentation as well, and various of the infrastructure around that. And I think certainly some of that definitely comes from upstream. And there are lots of links certainly to the projects that we're doing upstream that we could and should be tying those benefits in to any work that we're doing with farmers to reduce sedimentation, whether that directly affects those sedimentation issues or at least it's a sort of contributing factor. I think it would be good to sort of to demonstrate those linkages and just to help people to sort of realize the impacts downstream and the economic impacts, especially. A lot of the time we talk about biodiversity impacts that may be a less of a driver for some people, whereas when you talk about direct economic impacts, I think that sort of is slightly more hard hitting, so worth raising.
There's no doubt that sedimentation is probably an issue for most catchments as well. Okay, any other questions to our speakers?
Sorry,
Nick?
Natasha, I just had a quick comment. I put a link in the chat in response to Rob's request. So the USAR, the Using Sediment as Resource project, has been a 4-year interim project looking at exactly that question about building an economic case for disconnecting and mitigating sediment losses from river catchments into transitional and coastal waters. The European partners in USAR, it's fair to say, are a bit ahead of us in terms of the way that they dredge and reuse sediments in innovative ways. So they actually turn the sediment that they're dredging out of various receiving waters into a commodity. We don't have quite such a progressive approach as yet, but Simon Browning, who's been leading that project for us, has interviewed all of the harbour authorities and looked at doing an economic assessment of dredging in various estuaries and stuff. So have a look at the website for USAR. It's coming to an end now, but it's produced some quite nice stuff, so worth a look.
Okay, thank you, Nick. Any questions from the participants? Otherwise, we'll make the most of the time saving, I think. Rob, do you want to move on to the Northwest? Because we've got a bit more time for questions after the Northwest presentations, haven't we?
We have, yeah. Let's move on. I just wanted to make one comment to a post that Alan Frampton put on the chat, which raises a point about lack of representation of coastal partnerships and CABA partnerships, and this came up in the London workshop. And I guess there are no easy answers when resources are so tight, but one suggestion there, which seemed to sort of go down well, was that each party has a identifies a representative that can represent them at the other lot's meeting, so to speak. So I just wanted to flag that issue. But yeah, let's move on. We've got some time to make up.
Okay. Over to Caroline then.
Good morning, everyone. So I'm going to briefly give a Northwest overview and tell you about the work of the Northwest Coastal Forum, but the section of presentations that we've got coming up also include Claire McFarland from the Solway Firth Partnership, which is a cross-border initiative up in the north of the region. We're going to hear from Sarah Bennett, who's at the opposite end of the region. She's Tidal D Catchment Partnership, working across the Wales-England border. And then Susanna Bleakley from Morecambe Bay Partnership, and although we're going to hear again from Morecambe Bay Partnership later on as part of the WAMM pilot, Susanna's going to tell us about the wider work of Morecambe Bay. So without any further ado, I think if we can start the recordings for the Northwest session. Thank you. Hi, I'm Caroline Salthouse and I'm the manager of the Northwest Coastal Forum. I'm going to give you a brief introduction to the Northwest Coast for those of you that are not familiar with it, and then move on to an overview of the work of the Northwest Coastal Forum. So as you can see from the photo, we have a very estuarine and sedimentary coast with cross-border estuaries at each end with Wales and Scotland. In all, it's about 1,400 kilometres long, up to the tidal reach of the estuaries, and it has very big tides, up to 10 metres, so it's very changeable. We have over 6 million people living within 1 hour's drive of the coast. Over a third of them actually live on the coast, chiefly around the more urban and industrialised south of the region. Water quality is a huge issue for us. We have high rainfall, lots of rivers, vast intertidal mudflats with extensive shell fisheries and economically important bathing waters, particularly around our 3 big coastal resorts. And pretty much all of the coast is protected for its nature conservation value, and wildlife likes clean water. We also have a lot of protected landscapes and historic conservation value on the coast. We've even got 3 World Heritage Sites: Liverpool Maritime Mercantile City in the south, the Lake District National Park, which is also a World Heritage Site, and that has 23 miles of coast in South Cumbria, and then Roman Frontiers, aka Hadrian's Wall, which comes a long way down the Cumbrian coast, far beyond the wall itself. So regionally, it's a very complex picture to manage. So this is just a quick slide to give you a flavour of the active coastal partnerships in the Northwest, and the potential for new ones where we've had active partnerships in the past, but mainly because of funding issues, they've fallen by the wayside. Some are very long-standing, and you're going to hear from 2 of these shortly, Solway Firth and Morecambe Bay. Uniquely, we also have an overarching regional coastal partnership. That's the Northwest Coastal Forum, England's only regional coastal partnership. And we also have an international one, the Irish Sea Maritime Forum, which is slightly more focused on marine governance, but does include coast. So the Northwest Coastal Forum, I'm not going to go through everything on this slide, it's really there for reference, but basically we aim to achieve more sustainable coastal management through promoting an integrated approach. And the outcomes that I've listed here are what we consider this sustainable future looks like. So why do we exist, and what do we do? We were established back in 2000 as a non-profit multi-sector partnership by government, chiefly to assist with regional coastal planning, after research commissioned by the then Department of Environment, Transport and the Regions. This didn't come with any cash attached, but we managed to attract funding from various sources for 17 years. However, we finally ran out of money back in 2017. And we've kept going since then on a mainly voluntary basis because the board could still see value in it, and because we considered it would have been a bit daft to stop just when the work on the Northwest Marine Plan was getting going. So one of the funded projects we've worked on since then is stakeholder engagement in marine planning for the Marine Management Organisation, encouraging cross-border and hard-to-reach contacts to engage with the Northwest Marine Plan development process. And you can see our Jolly Sea Captain poster from the Spring 2020 campaign there on the left. Currently, we're providing regional coordination on behalf of Coastal Partnerships Network for this project, the Wholescape Approach to Marine Management. We've always worked at a very much strategic level, feeding into regional and national policy and legislation and providing advice and technical input into other projects. For example, we sit on the North West Turning Tides Partnership, which is all about improving bathing water quality. And in conjunction with Keep Britain Tidy, we run the North West Beach Management and Bathing Waters Network, which is the operational beach managers subgroup of Turning Tides. Key to our communications and project work is our stakeholder outreach. We have a database of over 900 contacts. One of our key roles is communicating relevant coastal information through our newsletter website with a sporadic e-newsletter and many events. I've lost count of just how many over the years. And these have been on a very wide range of issues. And since 2010, we've also been showcasing inspirational work and best practice through the North West Awards for Coastal Excellence, which has categories for Coastal Champion, Coastal Community Action and Coastal Best Practice. And these are going to run again in 2021, I hope. So, despite being voluntary, we are still active and are making plans to celebrate our 21st in 2021. And on that happy note, I'll finish. So these are my contact details. Thank you very much for listening.
Hi, I'm Claire McFarlane and I'm the Partnership Manager with Solway Firth Partnership. The area that we cover is the Solway Firth, which includes the boundary between Scotland and England in the west of the country. So we work all along the Dumfries and Galloway coast and along the Cumbrian coast down to St Bees Head. We work under the themes of partnership, planning, environment, fisheries, energy, especially renewable energy, and generally raising awareness of the coast and the marine environment. Over the last year, Solway Firth Partnership has worked on a wide range of projects, as you can see from this list, ranging from producing publications that promote the area to running the Robin Rig Wind Farm Community Benefit Fund. I won't go into detail about all these projects, but we'll have a look at two projects that I think are relevant to this forum. The SMILE project is a 3-year, about £111,000 European Maritime Fisheries Fund project that was set up to update the 1996 Solway Firth Review. It's all about having as much information about the Solway as possible and giving us the kind of first steps towards regional marine planning in the Scottish Solway. Obviously, we already have progressed with the draft Northwest Marine Plan on the Cumbrian side of the Solway, and really we're just trying to make sure that we're trying to keep up a bit, at least with information gathering. In addition to this, the project commissioned a socio-economic study of the Scottish side of the Solway and the English side of the Solway, and those two reports are available on our website. So the review is set up in the same format as the National Marine Plan for Scotland. It's in 4 sections: clean and safe, healthy and biologically diverse, physical and productive. And the socio-economic studies of both sides of the Solway have informed the productive section. And then we have some appendices which go into more detail about stakeholder engagement and methods of engagement. So because we've been able to have a project officer for 3 years for the SMILE project, we've been able to carry out a lot of stakeholder engagement, and the project officer has come along to a lot of events that we've attended. So that's included World Ocean Day events, harbour festivals, environment fairs and STEM events. And at those events, she's been able to find out from the public what sector is most important to them in the Solway, and also what their vision for the future would be for the Solway. So that's been very useful. And at the end of the SMILE project, we're hoping to continue carrying out data that will be valuable for marine planning in the future, such as an audit of shoreline access points around the Solway. The next project that we're focusing on is all about marine litter. We know that 80% of marine litter originates from land coming down river systems, so it's a problem throughout catchments. In the Solway, we have a particular problem of marine litter, but only really in certain areas, bays and stretches of the coast where the wind and currents direct it. Generally, the hot spots are in the west of Dumfries and Galloway, where there are more cliffs and bays, and it ranges from the smallest microplastics and nurdles to large pieces of plastic, wood and metal. We worked with the Scrapbook project in Scotland, which was set up with volunteer pilots from Skywatch who flew the Scottish coast in 2018 and 2019, taking aerial photographs of the kind of hotspots. And those photographs that were taken have all been analysed by volunteers, and it allows us to focus our work on those places where it's really needed. So we have a big volunteer effort across Dumfries and Galloway, but obviously the community groups tend to focus on accessible beaches. So we wanted to see what we could do about some of those hard to reach places. So Solway Firth Partnership took part in a trial with a number of partners to see if we could set up a new model. We chose a hard to reach bay to tackle and organised the local boat owners so that we could take litter off by sea. However, on the day, the wind was too strong, and so volunteers had to walk in and drag the litter out to waiting skips. They sorted the litter into plastic and non-plastic elements, and the plastic was taken to a local recycling company who were able to incorporate it into their plaswood product that they make. Unfortunately, we discovered that they can actually only use up to 5% of hard plastic within that production. So it really ended up not being a good solution for getting rid of a lot of large amounts of plastic. So the next thing that we did on the litter theme was to get funding from the Leader Cooperation Fund to carry out some learning visits to other places to see how they tackle litter and plastic in particular. So we had a visit to Plastica Bay in Durness, which is in the north of Scotland, and that's the one you can see in the photograph. They collect plastic, clean it, and shred it into pellets for remelting into things like clocks and mats, and they have a workshop specifically to do that. However, they're just focusing on one small bay, so we felt that probably wasn't going to be a good option unless it was for specific community groups along the coast. We then had a visit to Ireland, where they have government support to set up community groups all around the coast, and they help set those groups up, but then help them to become quite self-sufficient as well. And it's all branded according to their Clean Coast programme. And then the Isle of Man, they have a beach buddy system which seemed to have been set up by one really keen individual, and they're able to process a lot of their waste on the island. So the conclusion that we came to for Dumfries and Galloway is that really we need to set up a combination of the systems that we're seeing, but we're still really looking to try and put funding in place to set up a project to test this. And I think the key to all our projects is really communication. So whatever we're looking at and how we're talking to the public, we really need to make sure that we're doing that really effectively. And that's through our magazine, e-newsletters, our website and Facebook and social media, like Twitter and Instagram. And I just wanted to leave you with a few nice pictures of the Solway to show that we don't have litter everywhere. Thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Sarah Bennett from Cheshire Wildlife Trust, and I'm here today to talk to you about the Tidal Dee Catchment Partnership. So the River Dee runs along the border between England and Wales, and the Dee River Basin District has 3 management catchments. It begins with the Upper Dee management catchment in Wales, coming from the Snowdonia National Park, and flows down to the Tidal Dee catchment, which is the Dee Estuary. The Tidal Dee catchment is quite small. It has 8 river water bodies, 4 of which are in England, 3 groundwater bodies, the transitional water body, Dee North Wales or Dee Estuary, 2 coastal water bodies at the mouth of the estuary, and it also has a nitrate vulnerable zone, bathing waters at West Kirby, which is near Hoylake on the map, and also a suite of statutory nature conservation designations. In terms of water body status, we can see that most of the water bodies are at moderate status, including the transitional Dee Estuary water body. Reasons for not achieving good status include point and diffuse source pollution from the land, so including agriculture, septic tank issues and pollution from towns and urban areas. It also includes pollution from chemicals from historical mines and also physical modification. In terms of nature conservation designations, we can see that the D estuary is an SAC, SPA, Ramsar site, as well as a triple SI, and it has a suite of coastal triple SIs around the edge of the estuary, both in England and in Wales. The Tidal D Catchment Partnership was established as part of DEFRA's 2013 call for hosts to facilitate local collaboration between stakeholders. And for the first 2 years, the Welsh D Trust and Cheshire Wildlife Trust co-hosted the Tidal D Catchment Partnership alongside the Middle D Catchment Partnership. After a couple of years, Cheshire Wildlife Trust became the sole host of the Tidal D Catchment and Welsh D Trust the sole host of the Middle D Catchment. There were discussions as to whether the Middle D and Tidal D catchments should become one catchment partnership area, but we agreed that the Tidal D catchment had quite different issues to the more inland Middle D catchment. So the aim of the Tidal D Catchment Partnership is around maintaining, enhancing and protecting the D estuary. So considering its wildlife value, of which water is at the heart, and providing recreation and access to nature. And that's reflected in the objectives. In the early 90s, a D estuary forum was established through funding from English Nature for the Estuaries initiative. And over the years, a D estuary strategy was created in collaboration with over 90 organisations around the estuary. There were numerous initiatives and projects, and there was a funded coordinator. Unfortunately, the D estuary forum folded due to lack of funding. And then a few years later, the Tidal D Catchment Partnership came along. D Coastliners is the latest initiative from the Tidal D Catchment Partnership. It covers the whole catchment or estuary area and is a nature-based sense of place initiative, putting water and wildlife at the heart of communities considering the D estuary. The project works on both the Welsh and English sides. The aim of D Coastliners is one about communities and how they value the D estuary and how they can have a positive impact on the coastal environment, thinking about recreational pressures as well as water pollution issues from the land. Another aim is about establishing a platform for better decisions for the coastal environment, and that's about improving the governance of the D estuary. In terms of timescales, we are looking at a stage 2 submission to the National Lottery Heritage Fund in early next year, with a decision in the summer. And if successful, it will fund a 3.5-year project that's quite broad, involving communities, decision makers, and local people. If you'd like to find out anything further about that project, please feel free to get in touch with me. Thank you very much.
So Lucy, can you load up Susanna's presentation, please? No? Here we go.
Hello, I'm Susanna Bleakley. I'm absolutely delighted to be here. It's so interesting to hear all these other presentations. Could someone just wave to make sure that I'm being heard? Perfect. So I wanted to ask Caroline, are you able to progress my slides for me? Who's able to progress my slides?
Lucy, I think we'll do it if you ask.
Perfect. If I just put a hand up, if you could progress the slides when I do that, that'd be terrific. So asked to talk about Morecambe Bay Partnership and our work. We've got a very strong theme of engagement, but very varied work. We've got works to celebrate and conserve, from beach cleans to birds, from the history that shaped our communities to commissioning great art. And we've got a great variety of on-the-ground work, collaborating with varied partners. If you could move the slide on when I put my hand up, that'd be great. Thank you. And here we're working with Durham and Manchester archaeology students, making some of our historic sites their fieldwork sites and bringing in the local history societies, different local history societies around the bay, supporting them with archive research, archaeological digs, and trying to unpick some of the puzzles and the mysteries of some of our sites around the bay, and also doing oral histories. We've done a lot of work, if we could have the next slide please, we've done a lot of work with volunteers, including corporate volunteers such as Glaxo, here, for instance, we are removing bracken from this stone circle, and in doing so we took 3 sites off the Heritage at Risk Register. And we have an ongoing programme to survey and record, again with local volunteers, the astonishing landscape of World War I and World War II remains that were built to protect the shipbuilding capabilities of Barrow. We've got an ongoing programme of historic building surveys. Here we have been looking at a very early Victorian folly on a prominent headland, and we were able to do some renovation and restoration on this really lovely early Victorian folly. Next slide please. You're probably all very familiar with the problems of disturbance. And next slide please. We've been delivering a volunteer ranger programme for several years to look after the roosts, to engage people and raise awareness about this. And the next slide please. We're also passionate about curlews. We've been doing liaison work with farmers, looking at curlew nests and doing some quite interesting sort of groundbreaking work with drones and high resolution thermal imaging, because one of the great challenges is actually locating the nests. If you can find the nests, you can protect them. The next slide. In 2015, we launched the Bay Cycleway. This was delivered in partnership with the local authorities and with Sustrans. And this, from the year it was launched, has added an additional £1/3 £1 million to the local economy every year. Next slide. We've been expanding our disabled access programme, which involves opening up the coast and the countryside, improving footpaths to make them accessible, but also it involves trampers. And this is so important at the moment, not just for people who can't walk far, but for people who are vulnerable and therefore have been shielding and have become very isolated. And we're trying to expand this right now, working with some of the COVID support networks, so that those who really could do with the boost of being outdoors and in the countryside can really access that. And the next slide, our next programme over the next 2 years, and it's one of our biggest programmes ever, a very large 1.9 million programme funded by the Coastal Communities Fund, is all about making Morecambe Bay a centre for cycling and walking. We want to put an extension into the Bay Cycleway, taking it from Lancaster area to Fleetwood. We're looking at loops and spurs and extending family-friendly cycling routes. Loops and spurs also not just off the cycle route, but off the English coastal path. All of this about showcasing the very best the Bay has and improving the visitor economy, giving people more things to see and do, because there's a lot of exciting talk about an Eden project coming to Morecambe. And the next slide. We've also done a lot of work using art to create icons and to connect people to our maritime past. This is a permanent installation called Ship, with 2 figures, one looking offshore, one looking onshore, one looking to the past, to an ancient Celtic chapel, one looking to a modern nuclear power station and port. It's been really popular piece of public art, and it's so hard to get public art right. So we're really pleased to that this has been embraced by the local community. And the next slide is another example of a permanent artwork. The next slide, please. This is the horizon line chamber, which effectively it's a camera obscura that you can sit inside. It has a lens in one wall, which sheds the horizon onto the opposite inside whitewashed wall. It's one of Estuaries' pieces. I mentioned earlier, next slide please, our programme of collecting oral histories, the stories of our veteran fishermen. But to bring these to a wider audience, we have, for instance, done community dance. This was a performance that was staged against the setting sun on a headland beside the bay, and it spoke to both the strength and the fragility of the natural environment and of our fishing communities, and it encompassed community dancers alongside professional dancers. The next slide shows us how we took some of these oral histories and some of the other stories of our veteran fishermen into a pop-up museum and took it around some of the shows and festivals around the bay. And then in the next slide, wanted to talk about our Beach Clean programme, which has been running for in fact 17 years. We've got locality groups. If we look at the next slide, from doing this work, we became very concerned about plastics. You'll see here, next slide, that this bottle says 6 old pence off, and it was picked up fairly recently. So we knew that plastics was a huge problem. Next slide, please. And when we've done surveys, we've found plastics is right up there, alongside the plastic bags, balloons, and inevitably much of what we pick up is plastics. Next slide, please. When we actually tabulate it out, all of the top 10 items, apart from metal drink cans and female sanitary, are plastics. So working with our Beach Clean leaders and volunteers, next slide please, back in 2006, so 14 years ago, we started work with the local authorities, and there was this plastic task group that made recommendations, and you can see them on the next slide, where they are asking both their own authority to not use single-use plastics, but also asking government to make changes. So this is, this is something we've been on a long journey with. If we look at the next slide, right now we're so pleased to be part of this WAMM programme. We've been doing microplastic surveys, but through an ongoing long programme that we've had with United Utilities and the Environment Agency, we've been looking at bathing water issues, looking in particular this year at plastic-free periods as a major campaign, and looking at working with girl guides groups, which we just touch on in the next slide. And just, we can skip over that one. And then just to give a plug to our back one slide, please, to the intermediate slide, talked about our Love My Beach programme and gave the contacts for Anya, who is our new officer, who has only been with us for a very short time. And then just to wrap up, coming back to this final slide that I showed at the beginning, just to sort of give you a sense of the variety of our work. So a lot of engagement, a lot of work with volunteers, working with arts, working with disabled access, cycle routes, historic and natural heritage. So really, really, really varied programme of activity. And should anybody wish to contact me, I think the final slide was my contacts. Thank you.
Thank you, Susanna. I'd like to say thank you to Claire and Sarah too for their contributions. Really, really interesting stuff. We're going to move on to questions now. I think we've got a few minutes for questions. We are running a little bit late, but I think we've got enough time to take one or two if people have burning questions they want to ask at this point. So I would ask that all the speakers put their cameras and microphones on so they can answer questions if necessary. But I'd also like to mention, I didn't talk much in my Northwest overview. In fact, I didn't talk at all about catchment partnerships. And that's because Dan Turner from the Rivers Trust is going to be covering that later from the Northwest point of view. So does anybody have any questions? If you put them in the chat, then we can pick up on them. If not, I'll hand back over to Rob.
I was just typing in a question in the chat actually, or more a comment to Sarah, her work in the D, and I just wondered if she was aware of the NERC study a few years ago on microbiology that had the D, I think, as one of their pilot studies. It was looking at viruses actually coming down the whole river network and into the coastal and estuarine environment. But it was, from memory, quite troubling, the results there. But I just wanted to flag that and wondered if you had anything to do with it, or if there'd been any follow-up to it.
No, if you can share some information on that, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, I'll try and dig it out. It's a couple of years ago now, but it was very, very alarming anyway,
Okay.
in terms of public health.
And Caroline, I can just add to the note that I put in the chat that the Skywatch volunteers, although they flew the Scottish coast to identify litter, they actually have got Skywatch pilots in England as well, apparently. And the only reason we didn't do the Cumbrian coast was because it didn't seem to have nearly such an issue with litter. We did fly in 2018, but then we didn't need to do it after that.
Interesting.
I was just to comment, Claire, I thought I was really struck by those photos you put up. I mean, they're troubling in one way, but you see what you mean about, you know, if you just look on the beach, you're not even touching most of the problem, really.
Absolutely.
Okay, all quiet, stunned silence. I think, Rob, if I hand back to you, I think we maybe have a time for a short break, comfort break.
That's right, yeah. So if we come back now, we may as well stay on the call, but, you know, turn your cameras off. We come back at 2:45 sharp, please, because we'll dive into the data and evidence session then. So we'll see you back at 2:45. Thanks. Hi all, welcome back. Hopefully you're all back with us. So we'll kick off this next session. We've got a presentation from the WAMM data team, Lucy and Catherine, on the data and evidence that underpins the project. So I'll hand over to them now.
Hi, good morning everyone. I'm Lucy Butler from the Rivers Trust Data and Evidence team, and I'm here today with my colleagues Catherine McElwraith and Annika France, and we're going to introduce you to some of the data and evidence support that's available to Catchment and Coastal Partnerships. So we're going to start by taking a look at the Coastal Data Package and Coastal Data Explorer, and then move on to story maps and finish with some information about citizen science and monitoring tools. And then we'll have a little bit of time at the end for some questions and discussion. So CABA partnerships make use of the best available data and evidence to develop a shared understanding of the issues and to target their actions and funds where they'll have multiple benefits for all partners. To support this, we've developed a national evidence base, which is brought together in the CABA data package. This is a collection of over 150 geospatial data sets from across different sectors and government agencies, which is provided to partnerships under a centrally negotiated data license. The data has been visualised to display the most relevant and important attributes, and a guidance document is provided to help both technical and non-technical users in interpreting and understanding even the most complex data sets. It's worth saying that the data package is more than just open data. We also get access to difficult to license data sets and make these available for partnerships. For example, the data package includes water abstractions data, the land cover map, the customer land database from the Rural Payments Agency, and the water industry's National Environment Programme. The data package is available both as a desktop version and online. However, it's worth noting that some of the data sets are only available in the desktop version, and this is mainly due to licensing restrictions in some cases. The data package is made available to all Catchment Partnership host organisations, but if you're a coastal partnership, you can contact your upstream CABA partnership and ask them to share the desktop data package with you as part of collaborative working. The online version is available via the CABA Open Data Portal, which you can find at data.catchmentbasedapproach.org. You don't require any desktop software or licensing to view the data through the Open Data Portal, and you can download the datasets from here in a variety of open formats to use in your own software. You can also pull data from here into your own online maps and story maps. So over the past year, as part of the WAMM project, we've worked to expand the data package to include more data relevant to coastal and estuarine environments, with the aim of facilitating closer working between coastal and CABA partnerships. So the data package now includes a further 30 online GIS layers related to coastal, estuarine and marine environments from a wide range of organisations. It is work in progress, so if there are any other data sets that you'd like access to or that you think would be good to share, then please let us know, either via the chat today or get in touch with us afterwards. So what is currently available? Well, there's many data sets which can help coastal and CABA partnerships identify opportunities for collaboration based around habitat and wildlife, recreation and culture, socioeconomic factors and coastal erosion. For example, we've included the recently released potential habitat restoration maps from the Environment Agency and MMO, which highlight potential areas for salt marsh seagrass and native oyster bed restoration. There's also data in there which can help you identify issues and pressures in coastal and estuarine waters, including WFD classification data, information on plastic pollution, NVZs and bathing water status, plus data to help understand the characteristics of coastal waters and data to highlight strategic plans. As with the wider data package, data sets have been visualised to highlight key attributes, and where possible, we've also customised pop-ups to ease interpretation and provide links to further data sources. To sit alongside the data layers, we've also developed the Coastal Data Explorer, and this is a simple web application which allows you to explore the data online without the need for any specialist GIS software or experience. And within the Explorer, you have the option to add any of the online coastal and estuarine layers, plus you can add any layers from the wider online CABA data package. So this enables you to start bringing coastal and catchment data together to build up that Wholescape picture. You can also use the Explorer to find your neighbouring coastal or CABA partnership and contact details, so you can get in touch and start talking and working together. So where can you access all these resources? They're all available via the online CABA data portal. And if you're on the site, if you head over to the working groups page on there and look for estuaries and coasts, you'll find all the links. If you're an ArcGIS user, you can request to join the CABA Coastal and Estuarine ArcGIS group, which will make it a little easier to search for and add the different data sets from the package into your desktop GIS and online maps. And you'll also find on there a link to watch a more detailed webinar which we held a few months ago, looking at the data package and how to access the layers and start using them. So I'm now going to hand you over to my colleague Catherine, who's going to tell you a little bit more about using story maps to share data and evidence.
Hi, I'm Catherine McElraith, and I'm going to go through some of the additional support tools that we have available. So one very useful and versatile tool is ArcGIS story maps. Story maps are web-based applications which allow you to combine maps and data along with narrative, images and other media. This combination means that you can share complex and wide-ranging information with your audience in an accessible and interactive way. They can be used for creating mapping portals, where catchment data and evidence can be held and shared with the whole CABA partnership. You will need a ArcGIS organisational licence to be able to create a story map, but once it's been created, it can be shared with anybody via a link. And also, if you're an NGO, you can get access at a heavily discounted rate through the Estuary non-profit programme. Through CABA, we also provide story map and ArcGIS online training and templates, workshops, and we host a gallery of story maps which can be used for inspiration. Here's one example of a partnership story map from West Cumbria Catchment Partnership. They've broken their portal down into various sections, including a summary of issues, current projects, and a focus on their catchment plan. It's a really nice example of a partnership story map, and it can be found on the CABA story map gallery or by searching online. We've also developed a range of educational resources. So these include online teaching resources such as a guided virtual field investigation and activity sheets, and there are templates which have been developed for the River Eden and the Bristol Avon, but these can be adapted for use in other areas. To explore all the tools and resources that we have, you can go to schools.riverstrust.org. Gathering local data is a key part of the weight of evidence, so we provide a wealth of technical support resources to enable this, including a citizen science and volunteer monitoring guide, which includes links to useful guidance on setting up citizen science programs, plus a guide to monitoring kit for all budgets, a review of mobile apps and maps, and a collection of case studies. This guide will be updated later this year, so please get in touch if you've got any suggestions for case studies or requests. We also have a monitoring planner, which is based on the River Restoration Centre's Pragmo Guide, to help partnerships identify and plan the best data gathering and management regime. We've also got a lot of information on water quality monitoring, including training resources and data samples to help access and analyse water quality data. Alongside ZSL, we've developed a guide and toolkit to running outfall safari, where volunteers survey urban water surface outfalls to help prioritise and tackle pollution sources. So this guide, additional resources and case studies can be found on the CABA website. The final tool I'd like to cover quickly is the Natural Flood Management Monitoring Tool. This tool has been developed to support the monitoring and evaluation requirements for the 79 DEFRA-funded NFM, Catchment and community projects. It allows CABA partnerships to submit information about the various NFM features within their projects, and includes intervention type, for example, riparian woodland creation, soil improvements or offline storage, and also data along with the location and estimated storage volumes. And by collecting this information across the whole country, we should be able to carry out much needed analysis and evaluation of the impacts and benefits of different NFM structures and projects. That was a very brief overview of the range of technical support tools available. If you've got any questions now, we'll do our best to answer them. Thanks very much.
Okay, if anybody's got any questions about that they'd like to post in the chat. Was that a question from Kaya?
Yes, it is. I'm working on a mobile phone because my system is so locked down it won't let me use Zoom. So it's taken me a little while to use the little teeny buttons on it. So thank you for seeing my wave. It's a question because I think the mapping system is just fantastic and has got so many opportunities. But I think I only understand a fraction of what it could do. And I don't know whether you guys can offer us partnerships some more detailed training on how we can use it and how you've built some of those resources up. I have looked at it online and I get a flavour for what it can do, but I think it would be so useful for us. It would be fantastic.
Did you manage to watch the longer webinar that we did back in May that Catherine had the link on the final slide to, and we can post that into the chat in a minute. That gives a bit more introduction.
I've looked at some bits, but I don't know whether I'm looking at the right bit because there's just information overload everywhere that I never know if I'm looking at the right bit or not.
Well, that's a good place to start, but then I think obviously the one project finishes at the end of October, but in October we could probably set up a call with you to screen sharing a Zoom meeting like this, and if there's you and maybe a couple of other colleagues in your region who'd like to join that, we could certainly take another look at those resources and sort of guide you through it, and that would be an opportunity to ask some more sort of targeted questions on the things you're particularly interested in if you'd be keen to do that. I think that's something we could maybe do it in October.
So will there be no resource for managing and maintaining that resource after October?
So we'll obviously be able to sort of maintaining it a bit through the CABA funding that we have in terms of the CABA data package and the layers in there, and maintaining that package and access through that, and the support that we can give through CABA. But in terms of the direct WAMM project, that's the end of this phase of the project. I don't know if Rob or Amy want to jump in with anything about future possibilities in that area.
Not really much more to add, Lucy. I think, yeah, we'll be hopeful of maintaining through CABA funds and perhaps one or two other miscellaneous sources as well. So the aim is to keep things going and have that as one of the key legacies of the project. But, you know, maintaining these platforms is always a challenge in the longer term.
Doesn't sound too good.
Well, I think you know, we're reasonably positive with this. I think in the midterm we should be fine. So we're not going to just walk away from it.
I think with story maps though and information platforms, it is something that partnerships need to build in to their long-term plan and, you know, develop that sustainably themselves, because we can't be relied upon to sort of keep updating other people's systems. So really we want to build that capacity within partnerships through training and sort of some ongoing mentoring.
Yeah, as a coastal partnership in the Thames, we developed a project that would give us a sort of sea to source, we call it, approach to fish migration, and got GIS capability in-house in order to do a big mapping exercise. So it's kind of, for us, it was spotting the opportunities where we could get that skill in-house, and then that's had added benefits to other areas of our work because we have that expertise. Just in terms of the national level database, obviously we're as a collaborative team between the Coastal Partnerships Network and the Rivers Trust, we're interested in what WAMM Phase 2 looks like. So we'll be looking at how can we generate more support and resource to at least keep going on pulling that national level database together and refining it and helping build that training and capability into coastal partnerships from our side of things. It's definitely data is the way forward, but as I'm sure you appreciate, estuaries and coasts don't have as robust monitoring in place, and it's harder from a citizen science point of view to actually develop those approaches because of the risk to health and safety. So that's something, again, we've been sort of trialing and looking at in the tidal Thames, but it's finding the right funding sources that will actually support that, because the government funding streams through catchment partnership work don't support monitoring. But we do advocacy at a national level with the national EA estuaries and coast team, provide them evidence to back up asks from them to DEFRA. So through a multi-pronged approach, trying to prod everybody from different angles, hopefully we'll get more robust resources for estuaries and coasts within the next few years. That's the plan anyway.
I've just seen, Kaya, a message from Nick Paling in the chat about local CABA partnerships picking up on the outputs and using them, and suggesting you get together to have a look at the impact of those data sets and tools. So maybe we want to follow up directly with Nick there.
Thank you.
So I think if there's no other questions, people can obviously post questions later in the day and we'll answer them. I'll hand back to Dan, who's going to introduce the next session.
Hi all, I'm Dan from the Rivers Trust. For those that don't know me, I recently joined the Rivers Trust from one of the local Rivers Trusts. So one of the key aims of WAMM is to take a more holistic and collaborative approach to the management of estuarine and coastal waters. And we all know that we can't decouple rivers and our coasts. So WAMM has provided a brilliant opportunity to better understand the interaction between riverine and coastal environments. Morecambe Bay has been selected as the pilot study within WAMM, and it brings together Morecambe Bay Coastal Partnership and the 3 CABA partnerships led by the Loon, South Cumbria and Wyre Rivers Trust to work more collaboratively. And the main focus of this project has been plastics, understanding source pathway and ultimately their presence in within coastal and estuarine environments. While this project has been significantly impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, all the partners in this project have done a great job of identifying some of those key issues and taking actions to resolve them. And we are now going to hear from all 4 partners involved in the project, followed by Catherine from the Rivers Trust, who's going to talk about how we are using data and evidence to tell a more compelling story, building that capacity, and hopefully provide a really good basis to develop future co-designed aspirations. So first up, Amy from Morecambe Bay.
Hi there, my name's Amy Hopley and I'll be presenting this 5-minute presentation on Morecambe Bay Partnership and our involvement in the Wholescape Approach to Marine Management project. To start off, I wanted to introduce the project officers working on this work. It has been myself, I'm the Nature and Wildlife Officer for Morecambe Bay Partnership, and up until a couple of weeks ago it had been Hannah Barnes as the Love My Beach coordinator. However, Hannah has recently left us to pursue a career in teaching, and we have very recently welcomed Anya to the team as the Love My Beach coordinator for Morecambe Bay Partnership. So Anya will be working on the WAMM project with me from this point onwards. I just wanted to give a bit of background on Morecambe Bay Partnership, our aims and vision, and how this fits in with the WAMM project. So Morecambe Bay Partnership is an organisation that works towards a thriving bay, rich in wildlife, landscape and culture, and that inspires and connects residents and visitors alike. Our aims, which you can see here, connect closely with the aims of the WAMM project. And as a partnership charity, we do a lot of collaboration with various organisations all the way around Morecambe Bay and beyond. So it was really fantastic to be welcomed to the Morecambe Bay pilot team for the WAMM project. We cover all of Morecambe Bay from Fleetwood right up to Walney Island, and Anya's Love My Beach work extends right the way up past Morecambe Bay all along the Cumbrian coast as well. So we cover quite a large area, mainly on the coastal side of things. So quickly I'll just give an overview of the work that Morecambe Bay Partnership does, particularly the work relating to myself and Anya. So myself, as Nature and Wildlife Officer, I work on various projects to protect the nationally and internationally important bird roosts and also breeding populations of waders and waterfowl around Morecambe Bay. So I do this by engaging with locals and visitors, and also by managing a team of National Ambassador volunteers who are fantastic and go out to the coast all the way throughout the winter, armed with telescopes and binoculars, and show people the birds that they share their doorsteps with, in trying to inspire them to take better care of them, raising awareness of things like recreational disturbance and how this affects the bird's ability to survive through the tough winters we get around Morecambe Bay. I also work with landowners and volunteers through the summertime to protect vulnerable curlew nests in the Life Valley and various other places around South Cumbria. Anya's work as Love My Beach is part of the work that Love My Beach has been doing around Morecambe Bay and Cumbria for the past 7 years. So since 2013 they have been running a public engagement campaign, working with local authorities, schools and businesses, and trying to promote messages and better behaviours which will in the end improve beaches and bathing water quality right across the northwest. So the other main piece of the work that Anya does is also working with beach clean volunteers who have been working tirelessly over the past 7 years and collected a very impressive over 50 tonnes of rubbish in their time, keeping our beaches beautiful and pristine, exactly how we like them and exactly how the wildlife that we share the coast with likes them. So for the WAMM project, we have a couple of projects well, we had a couple of projects in mind, but they were slightly scuppered by the events of 2020. So the first one was to conduct microplastics surveys following the methodology of the Big Microplastics Survey to build a better picture of the microplastics in Morecambe Bay. Obviously, through the beach cleans that we do, we learn a lot about the sorts of plastics that are washing up, but microplastics were sort of the missing part of this picture. So and then the other project we were hoping to work on was recording plastic found in birds' nests and also any entangled birds or that were seen by the Natural Ambassador volunteers. Obviously, due to lockdown, I was unable to get out to breeding bird sites and nature reserves to look at bird nests and see if there was any entangled ones. But instead I did find a research project with a story map where anyone can submit photographs of entangled birds or nests containing plastic, and this will contribute again to a global citizen science project. So once again, those little data from Morecambe Bay, similar to the microplastics data, but we do hope to encourage sightings reports to build a picture of how marine and coastal litter is affecting the survival and breeding of birds here. And we will promote this alongside the promotion of the microplastic surveys.
Hello, my name is Louisa Blundell. I am the project officer in charge of our WAMM Morecambe Bay collaboration, and I'm just going to give you a quick overview of what we've been looking at as part of that project. So a little bit of background as to who we are as a Rivers Trust. We were established in 1998 and have been catchment hosts since 2014. We've a very active partnership, including 46 active organisations that we work alongside on a day-to-day basis. We are very small as a trust, so our chairman is Mick Jackson. We have 8 trustees and currently 4 members of staff. We look after a very sizable catchment, so we cover both the Loon and the Keir catchments, and that represents over 1,511 square kilometres and spans 3 different counties, so starting in Cumbria at the top of the catchment, across into North Yorkshire and down into Lancashire. Our whole-scale approach to marine management really consisted of 3 different elements, so collaboration and sharing of data with our other key partners. We wanted to look at microplastics and also microplastics, and this was going to be focused very much in the tidal element of our catchments. On the macroplastics side, we have so far done 3 litter picks. We still have 1 more to go, so we're still collating the data from those collections. It was important from a scientific point of view that we looked at covering the same location with the same number of volunteers and over the same length of time. The rubbish was then categorised, so we removed all of the plastic rubbish out of the collection that we'd done, and this was split up into different types of plastic. So, for example, single-use plastic bottles, plastic bags. We looked at takeaway containers, crisp packets, and so on. And then these were weighed, and then we could identify the highest numbers. We still haven't quite finished this element of our delivery. However, early indications suggest that by far the highest level of plastics that we were experiencing were single-use plastic bottles. We were quite surprised to look at the quantity of plastic bags that we were collecting. We only found 1 in over the 3 litter picks in total, and I think that had we been doing this some time ago, certainly we would have been finding a significantly higher number of those. So that was quite an interesting thing to note. On the microplastic side, we've been working very closely with Lancaster Environment Centre, based up at Lancaster University. Again, the focus was on the tidal loon, and we wanted to look at sediment analysis rather than water column, because this would give us a really good indication of plastic pollution over a much longer period of time. We decided to look at microplastics as plastic that was less than 5 millimetres. There isn't at the moment currently in the UK very clear criteria for identifying microplastics, but that seemed to be the standard, and the university wanted to look at standardising on that basis. We looked at 5 sites, including an upstream site, as a test case, and then it was just a case of collecting those samples. It's been a more laborious process than we thought, actually. So once you collect the sample, the liquid then needs to be removed from that sample. The plastic then needs to be counted by hand using a microscope and then categorized, and that's all done visually. So it can mean an awful lot of time in a very dark room for our poor Cameron, who is our student who's been doing this alongside us. And this is just us out and about sampling on site, so sampling up at Sunderland Point and in Halton. And the results that we saw so far, we broke those down into fibres, beads and irregulars. Beads are very much manufactured. They're the kind of type of plastic that you might see in shower gels and shampoos. Fibres and irregulars tend to be much more strandy and are more likely to be plastic that has started to decompose. And in terms of the collaboration side of it, we've been working together as a group, both at national level and at local level, to develop a story map that will indicate and show the type of results that we've been seeing from the plastic work that we've been doing. We've also been holding regular workshops to understand each other better as organisations so that we can help be more supportive and look at collective projects. And we're also looking at a long-term collaborative approach to future funding as an example, and a holistic approach to looking after Morecambe Bay. And so that's just a very quick overview of what we've been doing. I think it's been a really encouraging and interesting project so far. Certainly from the research that we've found out, there's an awful lot that we can now use to look at forging a plan to go forward. Many thanks.
Hi, I'm Tom from the Wales Trust. I'm the General Manager, and today I'm going to talk to you about our trust and our role in the WAMM project. The Wales Trust, we're a small charity working through the River Wyre, its tributaries and its catchment. Our projects focus on delivering multiple benefits for the Wyre catchment, and they have a focus on water quality, water quantity, habitat quality and connectivity. We also focus on flood risk and climate change as well. We have a small but expanding team of 4 members of staff who have a wide range of experience delivering environmental projects. We also host the Wyre Waters Catchment Partnership and the Wyre Estuary Group. We work with a wide range of partners that includes local authorities, statutory agencies, businesses and academia, and they all help us deliver a wide range of projects across the catchment which we wouldn't otherwise be able to deliver by ourselves. So the Wyre catchment is around 250 square miles. It begins in the Forest of Bowland, and then the river flows onto the Amanda's Plain and onto the Fylde coast. The mouth of the Wyre is at Fleetwood. The source of the Wyre is situated within the Bowland Fells, and the Wyre is home to a wide range of agriculture and industry. There's some exceptional pieces of river and habitat within the catchment, and there are some pieces that aren't so good. In terms of the transitional and coastal water bodies, obviously there is 12 miles of the River Wyre that is tidal. This supports a wide range of marine and freshwater species, and then the river flows into the south end of Morecambe Bay, which is the second largest intertidal area of mudflats in the country. So the YRT aspect of the Wholescape Approach to marine management. Our plan was to focus on migratory fish, commercially important marine fish species and plastics. This plan was great up until COVID hit. So the reality is that our smelt tagging, which was planned in November 2019, unfortunately didn't go to complete plan. We managed to tag 2 adult fish, which were never seen again. So now we have a revised programme starting in 2021 with funded by a different organisation. We then plan to tag salmon smolts to monitor their downstream migration to see how they would use the estuary. This was cancelled due to COVID, and then our juvenile fish surveys, which were focusing on these commercially important marine species, were also put on hold due to COVID, and our works on microplastics, which ties into the works of Loon Rivers Trust, the Morecambe Bay Partnership and South Cumbria Rivers Trust, are also on hold our work was to look at the microplastics within the water column and within the guts of fish and shellfish. So in terms of collaboration, we're working with the Loon Rivers Trust, the Morecambe Bay Partnership and South Cumbria Rivers Trust, and we hope that collaboration will lead to the development of a Morecambe Bay wide project or projects which focus on the bay and its contributing catchment. The collaborative work will provide a wide range of benefits for the bay and the participants of the project. We hope that a collaborative project would have a much wider reach and a much wider scale than something that could just be delivered by our own organisations independently. So, in terms of the Wyre Waters Catchment Partnership and the Wyre Estuary Group, the Catchment Partnership was formed as part of the Catchment-Based Approach initiative in 2013, and the Estuary Group was formed in 2015 to focus on issues relating to the estuary, which is quite a complex science in itself. Our Catchment Partnership now actively contributes to delivery of environmental improvement across the catchment. It's contributed to well over 35 projects now, and as we said, we work with a wide range of partners to deliver effectively. In the Wyre catchment, the Estuary Group is a particularly effective arm of that partnership, and we work with a wide range of partnerships from business, academia, industry, and the statutory authorities to deliver a wide range of projects. Successful examples include the 2 BioBlitzes that we've hosted in 2015 and 2018. We also work on a range of urban NFM projects within the lower catchment, and these we hope will be very effective at reducing the impacts of flooding in Thornton. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Jane Wilkinson from South Cumbria Rivers Trust. I run our catchment partnership Bexter Bay, and I've also been leading on the South Cumbria part of this Morecambe Bay pilot. South Cumbria Rivers Trust currently has 6 members of staff and was established back in 2006. We cover 5 main catchments which drain into Morecambe Bay. Our catchment partnership Bexter Bay was also established in 2015 and is now very active with over 15 partnership organisations who contribute regularly. They take a strategic overview to catchment management, helping to identify priorities and drive action for South Cumbria. They also work to share information based on robust data and evidence with a wider audience and in a more accessible format. Our role within the WAMM project was to look at water quality and microplastics. So South Cumbria is a largely rural area. We know there are water quality issues, but we rarely have the evidence to support this, and where there is evidence, it's not always at the level we need. So we developed a project linking into the bathing waters around Morecambe Bay and identifying areas where there are potential septic tank issues. We've also been working closely with Loon Rivers Trust to discuss options for sampling microplastics, potentially in septic tanks or the water column. Our project then focused on Leighton Beck near Arnside. This is a relatively small catchment, so this allowed us to identify a number of monitoring sites to capture different inputs and each of the different tributaries which feed into this system. Inputs that we were considering included caravan parks and agricultural land and septic tank potential hotspots. We then developed our monitoring programme to capture baseline data, so routine sampling once a week, and at more standard times, but we also developed a reactive part to capture any changes such as during wet weather or during particular events where there might be tourist numbers, for example. And some of this was focused on evening sampling and weekend sampling outside of the usual Monday to Friday 9 to 5 when standard monitoring programmes occur. Our sampling has largely focused on phosphates and nitrates in terms of the water quality. We were also hoping to look at fecal indicator organisms with the link to bathing waters. However, due to lockdown, we've only been able to take 1 sample. Since lockdown, the labs have closed and are no longer accepting commercial samples for this. However, the phosphate sampling and the nitrate sampling is providing some really interesting results so far. So the graph on this slide shows our results from phosphate sampling once a week, or at least once a week. And you can see on there we've put in the Water Framework Directive boundaries, so the dotted lines going across. Most of the Environment Agency data prior to this monitoring programme was suggesting that phosphates were coming out and meeting the high boundary. However, this data set clearly shows that on a number of occasions at a number of different sites throughout the catchment, that isn't the case. It's regularly or frequently going below the moderate boundary, and we've had a spike at least, which is going well below the poor boundary. This is the largest concentration that we've picked up, and this was picked up during our bank holiday weekend sampling, which just shows the value of sampling at some of those different times and being able to capture some of those peak events. The other aspect to our project was to consider plastics and microplastics in particular. So throughout the project, we've been speaking regularly with Loon Rivers Trust in particular, and using their links with Lancaster University to discuss the options of microplastic sampling and the feasibility of doing this. We've had a number of discussions around sampling microplastics in septic tanks, which was of big interest to the university at the start of the project. However, that's got a number of obvious complications. So we then moved on to looking at sampling the water column. This was due to progress in March and April, but was halted due to lockdown, and it's something we've now started to take back up, and we're trying to collate the learning that we can get from this that we can then share going into the future. We're still discussing options for getting out and doing some sampling of the water column. Additionally, while we've been out doing our water quality sampling, we've also observed and made note of any plastics which are present within the catchment. And we've also been speaking to Arnside and Silverdale AOMB, as we know they do regular litter picks around the catchment, to see if we can start to identify any potential hotspots that might be coming up from that. Throughout the project, we've worked closely with all of the partners, in particular with Loon Rivers Trust to discuss the learning from plastics, and also with Morecambe Bay Partnership to share some of the events and bring in volunteers for each of those projects. As a group, we've worked to look and develop future projects, identify future funding opportunities, and build on the strength of each of the organisations involved. The project has also allowed us to collaborate closely with other partners, such as Arnside and Silverdale AOMB and the Environment Agency, and this has really added value to the project as a whole. So many thanks for listening. We'll be writing the results up over the next coming months. I'm more than happy to share those with people. But if you'd like any further information in the meantime, then please do feel free to get in touch. My contact information is on the screen. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Catherine McElroy from the CaBA Technical Support Team, and I'm going to give you a quick overview of the story map that we've been putting together for the Morecambe Bay pilot under the WAMM project. So as mentioned in the previous presentation on data and evidence tools, the story map is a web-based application, and it allows you to combine maps and data along with narrative, images and other media. The most recent version of story maps is really intuitive to use, and it will work well on laptops, tablets and mobile phones. Again, as mentioned, you do need an organisational ArcGIS license to be able to create a story map, and you can get this through the Esri non-profit programme for a highly discounted rate if you're an NGO. So after discussions and partner meetings, it was decided that a story map could be a good format to bring together the issues, current projects and potential future projects for the Morecambe Bay pilot. The aims of creating this story map were to make a shared platform for the Morecambe Bay pilot through the WAMM project. And this would summarise the issues around Morecambe Bay, focus on the actions of the 4 partners and highlight any future project ideas. So now we'll go ahead and have a look at the current version of the Morecambe Bay pilot story map. There's still a little bit of time. So now we'll go ahead and have a look at the current version of the Morecambe Bay pilot story map. There's still a little bit of time left on this project, so the story map is still in draft format, and we're expecting it to continue evolving until we get to the end of the project. So if we scroll down from the landing page, we first have a short overview of Morecambe Bay, and the partnership between Lynn Rivers Trust, the Morecambe Bay Partnership, South Cumbria Rivers Trust and Wyre Rivers Trust. An embedded video then comes next, which gives a more visual introduction to the bay. Then the next section goes on to summarise the issues facing the bay, including sewage outflows, plastic pollution, and runoff from agriculture. As you can see, we've been able to include a wide range of media to support the narrative in each of the sections, including maps, videos, and images. And these change as the user scrolls down through the different sections of the story map. The next section of the story map focuses on the current action being undertaken by each partner organisation to address pollution and plastic around Morecambe Bay. So there is a section for each partner organisation and space for images or a video about their projects. Next up, we have a holding section where potential future projects and collaboration will be added. The partners are currently taking part in workshops to fully develop these ideas. Finally, there is a short map section showing where all the partners are based around the Morecambe Bay area. And that's then followed by some acknowledgements and links to further information. It's also possible to jump to any of the previous sections. So that was just a short overview of the story map that we put together for the Morecambe Bay pilot. You can find out more information about story maps and see a range of other examples by searching online for ArcGIS story map. And if you'd like to get in touch with us about the pilot story map, then our email addresses are on the slide. Thanks very much.
Well, yeah, thank you very much to all those in the Morecambe Bay pilot for presenting. It's really good to see what they've managed to achieve despite the very tricky circumstances we've all faced in the last few months. And it's also really good to see that, you know, the desire to, you know, continue this project, and hopefully we can, you know, continue the work and the legacy of this project. But I just thought I'd take this opportunity now to if there's any questions. So the first one is from Sarah. How have you dovetailed the Morecambe Bay story map website with the already existing Morecambe Bay partnership website? Catherine, do you want to take that on?
Yeah, so all of the links to the Morecambe Bay partnership and the individual data portals for each catchment partnership are included in the story map. So we didn't want to replicate all the information that's already held on those websites, but it's clearly linked within the story map.
Thanks, Catherine. Rob, did you have a question?
Yeah, possibly to Louisa, but maybe all the partners in Morecambe Bay. Where are we with I know we're not there yet, but a harmonised approach for monitoring plastics? You touched on it, Louisa, in your presentation. Are we, you know, are we in a sort of could we be in a worst case situation where we spend a lot of time monitoring to find out it was the wrong method, or are we sort of somehow, and this is my impression, moving towards some sort of agreed approach towards microplastics or macroplastics, whatever it might be? Just be interested to know where we are currently.
Louisa, happy. Oh,
I think, yeah. Can you hear me okay, Rob?
Yeah. Okay, yeah.
So I think in terms of understanding and developing a strategy for looking at microplastics, the university have come up with kind of a fairly clear and defined, this is how we're going to define a macroplastic, this is the criteria that it needs to hit and needs to meet. There isn't really as such a standard, I don't think, as yet. But certainly from the evidence that we were collecting in the areas that we did, I think it would be nice to explore it further. I think there would be a lot to be gained from analysing exactly what the plastics were, and see if we could tie that up. For example, with the M6, if that was plastic that was being delivered from the motorway junction, if we could identify that specifically, I think that we could really show some good evidence and data to look moving forward.
Thanks, Louisa. That's great. We've got a question from Claire. Where you've picked up plastics such as single-use plastic bottles, have you been able to recycle them? Or if not, where do they go? Really question. I don't know if any of the partners want to answer that. I know Tom's not online, but Jane or Amy?
We haven't really picked up plastics in our monitoring. We've been looking more at how feasible it is, so we kind of haven't really gone through the process of recycling and what we do with them. It's been working with other partners to understand kind of how big the problem is and how we can monitor that. I guess the next step would be more looking at that closer, moving into the recycling stage and other parts of it. But yeah, that's not something we've done so far. So sorry, I don't really have an answer to that one.
Amy?
I can give some feedback from the Thames. We've been running a project now for about 5 years with the Zoological Society of London and Thames 21 on monitoring single-use plastic water bottles. Our campaign is focused on, but Thames 21 do all litter collection. And they basically have an agreement with the local port authority, which is the Port of London Authority here in the Thames, and so basically the PLA have to, they take the waste from Thames 21 and then that goes into the waste management system. So the main barriers is basically storage and also the contamination of the plastic. They can't just go straight to the recycling plant. I think there's legislation that sits around it as to where it can go and how it can be responsibly disposed of. But there are several social enterprise companies down this way that are looking to capture some of that plastic to put into their businesses where they're creating like tote bags or t-shirts or whatever out of recycled plastic that's been picked up. But it's that bit around how do you clean it responsibly, essentially store it, and having the licenses and permissions. So it would be looking at your local area to see what permissions and legislation is in place, and then finding the right groups who to work with who already know how to do it.
Thanks, Amy. Maybe just one for to spark some conversation in the chat is, you know, what is responsibility of those organisations that produce these plastic bottles? I noticed that, you know, that's coming out as a clear one. I know that Surface Against Sewage obviously have rolled out a number of these campaigns, but it'd be just interesting to hear people's opinions about, you know, should we be trying to tackle these issues at source and, you know, looking at circular economy, etc. But it'd be interesting to understand people's opinions and thoughts around that and whether that's a good approach.
Well, from the One Less campaign we're working on, it's taken on purpose, it took a systems change approach, which means that you don't just look at cleanup, you look at the whole chain that supports, that's currently in place that supports this bad use of plastic. So everyone, it really highlights how everyone has a role to play, including industry, plastics industry, waste management systems, local councils, overarching, like in London we obviously have the Mayor's Office. There's a lot of debate around how obviously plastic is a great material, but the way it's designed for single use is a problem, because then ultimately it's not recyclable. And if everybody played their part, we could have a system that actually worked. So you have all plastic captured by the waste management system, recycling's really easy to understand, and we can still support our on-the-go behaviour through having drinking water infrastructure, refillables that we buy for ourselves and keep and maintain. And then single-use plastic, plastic has a place in terms of food packaging and drinks packaging, but only if it can be fully recycled, which isn't the case at the moment. So by only tackling it at end of pipe through cleanups, it's basically still enabling that consumer behaviour because it's somebody else's problem. Whereas if you tackle it at source, like you said, by working with businesses and local councils and the government, then you can actually make a step change into a different type of system. And we're putting together a toolkit so that others can understand what we've done and how we went about it and how they can use that toolkit locally. And that should hopefully be ready by the end of the year. So happy to send that around. But it's an approach called the systems change approach, which has been really interesting. And it's interesting when you talk to businesses and industry using that frame, is they really get it. It sort of switches a light on to say, oh yes, no, there is all of these different elements that if we work together to try and overcome these challenges in a venue, in a public space, in a business, then it creates more than the sum of its parts in terms of the change that you see in the world. Anyway, I'll stop talking.
Well, thanks, Amy. Yeah, and just I guess it's a huge problem. I know it's not plastics, but if you take, for instance, Red Bull, they produce 850,000 cans every hour. So we've got a huge problem there. So, yeah. So, Rob, do you want to kind of wrap up this section, reflections?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. So we have, let's say, 15 minutes for, reflections on the morning thus far. It could be broader issues. I've noticed things like climate adaptation coming up on the chat. Community engagement has been touched upon, but you might also want to raise a particular issue around one of the presentations throughout the morning. So have we got any takers for, have we addressed everything? Any burning issues that have arisen from the discussions thus far? So the floor is open to all.
Rob, could I just make a comment whilst people are thinking? Mm-hmm. It's been really interesting and helpful seeing the chat about plastics and sediment. I just wonder if there are other issues between catchment and sea which people would like to flag, particularly for the roadmap work. For example, invasive species. So, just think about other issues which require a wholescape approach. I'd welcome some chat about other issues. And I think maybe on cue, Ed might introduce another one about floodwater and fisheries.
If I may, well, I wasn't going to touch on that first, but what I wanted to say is to congratulate the project on the very significant achievements that it's made in a relatively short period of time, and what gives me particular pleasure is that you really have addressed two of the significant actions which we proposed as being key in taking the idea of the Wholescape approach forward to a more practical level of implementation, and that is to firstly collate the different experiences of existing partnerships and the initiatives associated with them, and secondly to promote shared learning, and really what I've seen this morning has really impressed me as a tremendous collation job. So well done to everyone concerned with that. It's a particular delight to think of an idea that I was party to getting so much traction without direct government involvement. That of course is the next step. So coming to that, I mean, I did mention the idea of the flooding problem, in that those on the land are wanting to minimize the flood risk, and so the idea has often been to shed water as fast as we can into the estuaries and to the coast. And then I listen to the local fishermen who say, well, that's all well and good, but the cod used to come inshore in the winter as the temperature dropped. The fresh water is now pushing the cod way out, and we can't catch them. So this is an illustration of one of the key aspects that I think needs to be discussed further if we are to achieve anything like a more holistic decision-making process that takes into account all of the interested parties, and that is trade-offs. Managing trade-offs is going to be, I think, one of the key issues for the future. I mean, developing a better decision-making process is going to be hard enough, but providing the evidence base that enables better decisions to be made will require the input from the partnerships that we have heard from this morning. And so there is increasingly a wealth of information to support better decisions. But that for me, I think is going to be one of the key stepping stones to getting a whole new form of governance, which is required. The other observation I make is it's always refreshing to see the importance of the Southwest and indeed the western side of the country featuring so prominently. I just wonder if the same stories are extendable to the east. The question of balance, I think, comes to mind, and whether the same storylines would be appropriate for the northeast, the east, and the southeast of England. And being a trustee of the Tees Rivers Trust, I do know there are particular issues of trade-offs with the coastal environment and other users, not least around the Tees Barrage and the problems that arise from that. So forgive me for going on a bit, but I just wanted to reflect on those observations, and perhaps they're more relevant to this discussion this afternoon.
Thanks, Ed. I think the point you make about the floodwaters is a really interesting one. And just to sort of add to that, I was involved in a CABA meeting not so long ago where a lady from a council in Suffolk said she was trying to address a really daft situation they had in whichever catchment it was. I don't remember the name of the river or the catchment, whereby the IDB, Internal Drainage Board, pumped out cubic meters of water, hundreds of cubic meters of water every year out into the estuary, whilst farmers, potato farmers in the upper reaches were crying out for water. So it does seem, whilst I agree with you about trade-offs, absolutely, I think there are times when you stand back from it and think there's a win-win to be had here. If we can just, to use your term, the Wholescape approach, take this Wholescape approach, take a holistic approach to the whole issue. So it's just a nice little example, or a bad example, if you like, to build on what the point you made.
Well, if I may endorse that, I mean, it is bringing much more to the fore the importance of natural flood management measures and the whole basis of trying to use the natural environment in the way in which it was designed originally. I mean, we have modified it dramatically to change the hydrology, and we're trying to sort of restore conditions which support the basic ecosystem functions which are underpinning the economy.
Thanks, Ed. Yes, I'm just looking at the chat here. Question from Harvey. Harvey, do you want to turn your camera on and put that question to the floor? It'd be nice to see a few more faces about the learning experience of this project.
Everyone, yeah, I'm Harvey from the Ribble Rivers Trust. Yeah, and I just wanted to know what the sort of key learning is from the project, learning experiences, and how this has informed your ideas about what should happen next, or what comes next after this project.
Yeah, good questions. I think the whole team might like to chip in here, but I'd flag the work that Natasha's doing on the roadmap, the framework for collaborative delivery, because I think that will really be a useful document and really enlightening as to how we go forward in terms of driving greater collaboration between CABA partnerships and coastal partnerships. And I think, as we've seen today, that we're still at the early stages, but the partnerships are beginning to understand that each other exist. I mean, that's kind of the low level we started from. And these sessions this morning and the equivalent one in York were really excellent. And people describing what they're up to, and there's a few light bulb moments, so that's great. I think at a sort of advocacy level with government, I understand that the Environment Agency, in their proposal to Treasury under the next spending review, have been very, very ambitious around coasts and estuaries as well, and ambitious in terms of CABA. So that's good news. So that's the first step. Whether Treasury like any of that or fund it to the extent we would like, I don't know. But at least that that ambition is in there, and I think that's really important to source new funding or source government funding. I'd say something else that I really believe in, this point I made in my introduction, that from CABA we've really seen, and just to reiterate, it's not with every partnership, it really isn't, it's with the better partnerships, the benefits of collaboration, breaking down that inertia and that fear of working with the other and coming together. There's been some really impressive large holistic projects that have been won because people have come together and unsiloed themselves, if that's a term, well it is now, and worked together and put together larger projects from even multiple sources of funding with multiple benefits. You see that as, that's the holy grail, I'd say, here. Actions like the Morecambe Bay story map, I think, are really important. In fact, I'm going on too long here because I'm still in my final comments I was going to make later in the day. But the story map and other such material, I think, really helps bring to life and builds confidence in partnerships as well, that they can deliver. I'll stop there.
Yeah, I mean, just to add, one of the reasons why I was so interested in this, in coming on today and listening and hearing about it, is that our Catchment partnership is really successful. But we haven't done as much in terms of the coastal areas and working with coastal partners in a joined up way. We've done it with on an individual basis, and we seem to be just outside of the Morecambe Bay work. So it is something that we're keen to get involved with, going forward. So it's been really good to hear about what's been going on in other areas and take some good ideas and tips from there to hopefully do something in the Ribble Estuary.
Yeah, that's really important, Harvey. I think we're very happy. We'd like to see this project have something of a legacy. It's all been very short and sweet, but we can act as a dating service for any partnerships that need to get in contact with one another in terms of contacts, but and to build those relationships. Going back to a point I made earlier, perhaps it's worth, leaving aside time and resources, perhaps it's worth each set of partnerships, coastal and CABA, designating a representative to go along to the others' meetings once, twice a year, and present. That will at least be an icebreaker.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thanks for answering my question.
Sorry.
Rob, is it also worth highlighting that the workshops from the northeast and the southeast, the materials are available online in answer to Ed's point earlier about comparative experience. We were planning 4 workshops. This is effectively 2 combined because of the online need. But we had some really productive and very dynamic interactions at both the Northeast workshop in Durham and then the Southeast workshop in London just before lockdown. And the materials of that are online on the CABA website. Yeah,
they're online, as all the data stuff you've heard this morning, the story maps and so on, the policy and legislation, they're all there as well. We'll send all these links out afterwards anyway. Question from Pelsmere. I'm not sure who that is, but does anyone know what happened to the proposed drinks bottles and can deposit return scheme? it's a good point. It would solve a part of the issue with single-use plastic bottles. I don't know myself. I don't know if anyone off the top of their head knows, or if someone could add something on the chat. And one in response to you, Natasha, from Phil Dyke. A further topic that transcends coasts and catchments is legacy landfill sites. Yeah, absolutely. Having been to Lyme Regis in the summer and seeing that landfill site erode away on the coast there. So a large NERC-funded project. Perhaps you'd like to respond to that one, Natasha?
Yeah, I mean, from a personal point of view, I'm familiar with the one at the mouth of the Estuary and the complications there with an old landfill site. But Phil, are you here on screen? Can you put your video on and maybe explain in a bit more detail the examples you're thinking of?
Yeah, can you hear me, Natasha?
Yeah, do you want to turn your video?
Good. I won't put the video on because I'm at the end of 4 miles of copper on Dartmoor, so I've got about 0.8 of a meg that I'm dealing with. But if the audio is okay. So yeah, I mean, we know that there are 112, EA have got a sort of high-level sort of handle on this. There's 112 legacy landfill sites around the coast of England. I think what the project at Newcastle is trying to do is to put additional layer of detail onto those and think about future behaviours of those sites in response to coastal erosion and sea level rise and the possibility of leachates. What we don't know in a lot of instances is what's in there, what's likely to come out, and in fact there's a whole question also about who's responsible, because a lot of these sites are actually orphan sites now. The originators have disappeared long since, and we're left with these. There's one site on the just east of Hurst Point towards Lymington on the south coast where there's been some work done recently. The cost of relocating that single location is about 50 million. And it's just a relocation out of kind of harm's way. So it's a huge issue. I think the work at Newcastle is going to be really useful. I just responded to Sarah actually, and I'll make sure that I dig out some further information and post it. I've got it to my fingertips at the moment, but I think it's a really interesting topic. The other thing was just what I would mention is we've just National Trust and the British Geological Society have just been completing a piece of scoping work, which we're going to put onto a website hopefully next month, which is around the issue associated with rising groundwater at the Trust. So the notion that as sea levels rise, it'll impact through saline intrusion and also impacts on the hydrology in the hinterland. So I think there's another issue there where we might see additional fresh, clear water flooding inland as in response to sea level rise and change. And we're a bit behind the curve on that one in the UK. The States and French have actually been quite active on it. So as that website becomes available, we've got what we're looking to do there is put in a fairly significant NERC bid us with BGS and other partners in the future to really sort of try to bottom that one out. But we've got this scoping study with a PowerPoint presentation so that people can share data and information, and it kind of links to the legacy waste issues as well.
Okay, thank you, Phil. I'll pick up on that with you at a later stage. Thanks very much for highlighting that.
Yeah, thanks very much. So Annika's just responded to the point about deposit scheme. Scotland's the first country in the UK to vote in favour. Others will hopefully follow. So we're not there yet in England and Wales, Northern Ireland. So we're almost at lunch now, unless there's a sort of burning question or point from anyone. I suggest we break now. It's been a long morning. It's always quite a struggle, these Zoom events that carry on for long periods of time. Dogs need walking. Cups of tea need to be had. So, actually, just reading from one from Caroline, big issue in the northwest with historic landfills. Yes, it is a huge issue nationwide. 150 odd, I understand. But we'll call it a day there, I think. And if you could all come back for the afternoon session just before 2 o'clock, please. Say about 5:02. We'd like to kick off on time. That would be really helpful. But thanks to all for your input this morning, to all the presenters. It's been excellent, really good, and those people contributing on the chat as well. And so don't bother calling off, but perhaps turn your cameras and your mics off, and we'll see you in slightly less than an hour. Thank you.
Welcome back, everybody. I hope you had a very lovely lunch and are now are full and refreshed, ready for the collaborative part of the day. And to set us up for that, I'm going to take us through a tool we've been using in the Morecambe Bay pilot and the other regional workshops to describe, there's a useful tool to help us think about collaboration a bit more deeply. But before I kick off, same procedure as before. So while we're just doing these presentations, if you could turn off your video and your mic, that would be fantastic. Any questions, pop them in the chat, and without further ado, I'll commence. So I'm Amy Pryor. I'm the Technical Director of the Thames Estuary Partnership. We're a coastal partnership that's been around for about 20 years, covering the tidal Thames, from Chelsea Bridge all the way out to the southern North Sea in Essex and Kent. And as with all coastal partnerships, we were set up to try and enable a more integrated approach across sectors for better management of the Thames Estuary. I also chair a national network called the Coastal Partnerships Network, which at the moment is voluntary led. That basically means that out of all of the 87 coastal partnerships and wider coastal initiatives, we agree to share knowledge and join together once a year in an annual forum to swap stories, share best practice, and raise concerns about the different challenges we're facing. And we do that without any resource. We self-fund it by everybody putting into the pot so that we can enable the venue hire for that once a year. We're on a trajectory of change right now. We received investment earlier this year to go through a theory of change to move the network from that voluntary basis into a professionalised legal entity so that we can do more for and with coastal partnerships across the country. So this project was really welcome because, as all coastal partnerships, they've been around for some of them as many as 30 years. And they've survived austerity, they've survived by finding that blended finance between projects and private investments, and they've been building those relationships you need for integrated approaches across a coastline through partnership working throughout that time. So we felt like we had obviously a lot to learn from Catchment partnerships because of the great work that they've been doing upstream, but for a long time we've been wanting to link up across that fresh and marine water boundary.
for better collaborative working across the whole system. So the Wholescape approach was really welcome, and we've really enjoyed working with the Rivers Trust this year. So excited to see where this goes and to see how we can how we can help enable even more collaboration across our catchments into our coasts and estuaries. So what do I mean by collaboration? We've been using this tool called the Simple Spectrum of Collaboration. And basically through the Morecambe Bay pilot project, we utilised some of the funds allocated to the Coastal Partnership Network to bring in an independent facilitator to help us think through what we mean by collaboration and how those pilot partners wanted to collaborate together. And the reason we did this is because collaboration is a big word, and it's understood to be different things by different people, and quite often it means different things in different situations. So it's actually a spectrum of working from, if you look at the spectrum in front of you, from the left-hand side, it can be a simple matter of information exchange, it's minimal risk, it's low effort, it doesn't require any challenging conversations. But as you move further across the spectrum to the right into true collaboration, where you're co-creating and co-delivering a project, then it requires a lot of effort. It requires a sort of shift, a step change in the way that you've been working to date. But it also carries high risk, because it might not come off after all of that investment of time and sharing of resources. Are you going to achieve what you set out to achieve? But if you do achieve it, you get the maximum reward across the board through multiple benefit projects. So it's really worth the time and effort. So to lead you through this, just to go a bit deeper into the thinking, I'm going to lead you through each step of the spectrum. So at the far left-hand side, you've got information exchange, as I said, collaboration, but it's very low effort. You don't spend a lot of time together. It might be a single meeting or a simple exchange of emails. And it might be that you agree to share some data that you individually hold, such as litter survey data, for example. There's very little risk, very little effort, but also not very much reward. As you move further across to the right, you enter a zone of coordination. So this is where an example could be you've exchanged your data, and actually you've both individually or in the group noticed a gap in knowledge. So you might agree to actually contact people within your networks to find any data that could fill those gaps in knowledge. And that might be a dedicated meeting. You agree to share data and discuss what you found from that deeper dive into your networks. And it requires spending more time together. As you enter in the cooperation zone, you're deepening those relationships. This could be a series of dedicated meetings, calls, actions, spending regular dedicated time together. And an example of that could be, now we've shared our data, we've talked to our networks, we want to co-produce a GIS, for example, a map to really visualize what this data is telling us so we can see where those gaps are. And we're going to agree to share our existing resources. We don't need to find any more resources for this, we can do it together, and we're going to share the findings. And then you enter the sticky true collaboration zone of co-creation and co-delivery. And this is where you might actually think about co-designing a project to find a solution to the problem that you found together. And that might include actually co-location, working together in the same office, spending really regular time together, investing large amounts of time and your existing resources to pull together a collaborative project that you agree to find the funding bits together and actually co-deliver once you've got the money in place. And entering this zone is actually very difficult. So somewhere, at some point in time, all of you will have worked somewhere on this spectrum. And you don't necessarily stay in one spot of the spectrum with the same group of people. You can move backwards and forwards across it depending on what's going on in the external world or maybe internally in the organisation. But it's actually very difficult to stay in that co-create and co-deliver end of the spectrum because it requires so much effort. And often you come up against very challenging organisational issues, possibly geographical issues, historic things that have happened between organisations before. So it's a very, very hard place to stay and to work at all the time. And not everybody, I don't think anybody achieves it all of the time. You're going to be moving across the spectrum given what's going on. So But it's worth saying that this, even though the, sorry, I forgot my point, I was just going to make that, but so the spectrum is just a really easy tool to help you think about how you've collaborated to date and how you want to collaborate in the future. And what we found in the Morecambe Bay pilot project is that this really helped to set the framework of how we could understand how we could collaborate better. So we're going to be using this spectrum in the breakout session for this afternoon. And at this point, I'm going to hand over to Natasha to take us through the instructions for the breakout groups. Tasha, are you ready to do that?
Yep, I'm here. Thank you very much, Amy. So the next hour is really about, as Amy said, deep diving a bit more into your catchment, your coastal area. We've grouped you into southwest and northwest breakouts, so you have a chance to talk to your near neighbours about your own experiences of collaboration and the issues that you have in your area from catchment out to sea. Each group should have a mix of coast and catchment and both perspectives, because we do have some national agency representatives here who probably have less of a focus on coast or catchment or marine, but see the wholescape in their national role. So we'll move you into breakout rooms in a minute, and if you could start in your breakout room, meet your facilitator. So each room has one of the facilitators from the WAMM team. There'll be a very quick fire roundtable, name, organisation, and if you could just say whether your perspective is mainly catchment or mainly coast, or definitely an overview, that would be helpful to make sure we've got a balance of catchment and coastal partnerships around the table. We've had to do a little bit of rejigging over lunch, but not too much. You should still have a balance, and it just helps the introduction. So in the breakout session, next slide please, Amy. You're going to cover 4 questions in about 40 minutes. And this is really working with the spectrum that Amy's just introduced. So the main exercise is under question 1. Just to think about where on the spectrum that you've just heard about does your partnership currently work most commonly with others. That discussion should focus initially on your partnership as a whole, but you may find in the sort of 10-15 minutes on this first question that you want to talk about specific projects, which is fine. You're going to be sharing a Google Sheet. Your facilitator will give you a link to a Google Sheet which you can all participate in and write up your thoughts directly. So we do want examples of specific projects in the spectrum. You'll see that when the facilitator opens your breakout session. So Amy, next slide please. So first question, where on the spectrum do you feel your partnership mainly works? And then next slide please, Amy. Second question will be, what are the main challenges and barriers to collaborative working in the experience you've had to date? And there are some prompts there of themes we're looking at through the whole WAMM project, which your facilitator will use if you need to be kind of given some ideas of what we're looking for. So then moving on from challenges to opportunities, and looking a bit more forward, can you suggest opportunities to improve collaborative working anywhere in the spectrum? So this gives an opportunity for you to speak to other partnership officers in your region about where we could perhaps improve collaborative working and strengthen work to tackle common issues. And then finally, and perhaps the most important question, so don't lose time, don't neglect question 4, because actually this is probably the most exciting one for the roadmap that will come out of the WAMM project. Is there a particular topic, task or project that you'd like to see happen? On the right hand side of the spectrum, so where, focused on the issues that require the most collaboration and maybe collaborative project design over some tricky issues that haven't had enough attention. That's the kind of thing we're looking for in the final question. So the facilitators throughout this 40 minutes will be looking for 1 key point of feedback. Next slide please, Amy. So across these 4 questions, next slide please, Amy. Across these 4 questions, we're looking for these key themes around capacity, expertise, areas of focus, issues, nature of working, and governance arrangements. So yeah, get on to question 4 would be my biggest tip. You should have about 10 minutes on each question, and then your facilitator will have a chance to feedback one key point, just over 1 minute or so in the plenary when we all come back together for the discussion. Okay, I think that's it. Annika is going to be supporting us on the technology to get us into the breakout rooms. You don't have to do anything as long as it all works. You should be now assigned to a breakout room over the next few minutes. Any problems, reach out to us in the chat, and we'll hopefully be able to respond. So we'll see you back here at 3:15. At 3 o'clock, we'll be trying to round you up so that we have a little break before the final plenary. Annika, did you want to say anything else? I've got Amy wanting to just say something before you send us away. Annika,
Yeah,
any technical?
Sorry,
Okay.
just before Annika.
Amy?
Just before Annika sent us away, I remembered what I forgot to say. One of the most important things, challenges that people find when collaborating is that they don't change the way that they work. So that's, it just reminded me in the prompts that actually that's something to think about in question 4 is, are there any areas of the way that you work that you could change that would enable better collaboration? Sorry about that.
Okay, well, enjoy the next 40 minutes of 4 questions, and see you back here in an hour. Okay, let's start the last session. Can the facilitators put their cameras on, please? Great, okay, we've got 15 minutes to reflect on the breakout rooms. I had the luxury of floating between them, so able to get a glimpse of the discussions, but I really look forward to having a proper look at the results of those 4 questions in 40 minutes. So one at a time, the facilitator is just going to feedback one key point over 1 or 2 minutes, and then we'll probably have a few minutes for any discussion before we go into the final presentation, and then some interactive polling and the wrap up before 4 o'clock. So let's go over to Amy first for your group.
I think, forgive me, my breakout group, I forgot to ask what you thought the key point was, but from my observation, I thought what came through really clearly was that there needs to be trust enabled over time, and that trust needs the time and space to develop effectively to have an effective collaboration. So some of the examples that were given were around projects that had taken that time to really understand either the industry perspective that they were working with, such as commercial fisheries, for example, or the farming industry, how it might work with the farming industry to understand what their needs are and what the regulators' needs are, and really enable people to see themselves as humans first, as people first, and then to bring them into a more level playing field of understanding of each other's needs and objectives, but someone, a neutral leadership role to enable that, to bring it together. So it's a bit of a mixed bag of a message, but trust enabled by a neutral leadership, and giving the space and time for that trust to grow and for the collaboration to really understand each other before you go into that co-create and co-deliver end of the spectrum.
All right, that's really interesting. Thank you, Amy. Okay, Lucy, Group B.
Okay, thanks, Natasha. So our key point was going to focus around your last question about particular projects people would like to see happen, because people got particularly enthusiastic about this idea, which was to take sort of more collaborative leadership to bring together particularly local interest groups that are working on plastic pollution issues. Often there's lots of these groups, both on the coast and further upstream, who are often very passionate but working in isolation. So it was felt that more sort of collaborative leadership to join it up could really give greater weight, particularly if the coast and catchment were involved, that would enable people to drive sort of more political action in that area, and particularly to have sort of joined up consistent messages around those plastic issues going out from both the coastal and the catchment partnership. And people started sharing loads of great initiatives and examples from both the northwest and the southwest region, where they could already come back for another meeting to sort of discuss and share that learning and knowledge.
Brilliant, great. Sounds really interesting. Thanks. Okay, Caroline.
Okay, so we'd identified in the opportunities that common issues across inland and coastal catchment areas would be a good place to go for some kind of project opportunity. And in the discussion on project opportunities, we came up with a whole series of different ideas, but one of the key things, the first one that we really got going on was litter. There's lots of good work going on across the region, but it's not region wide, if you know what I mean. So it only takes place in some areas of the region, and there are ambitions to expand some of the really good work that's gone on, for example, around Morecambe Bay into the Dee. And everybody agreed that litter is a common denominator for everyone, and it would be really good to have a project to tackle it. A lot of it comes downstream, about 80% of it originates on land and comes downstream. And then there were all sorts of issues in terms of the circular economy and recycling. What do you do with the waste you collect? And how do we stop it being waste in the first place? Working with manufacturers, buyers, and thinking about disposal, not just picking it up, not just dealing with the end project, so, and end product. So, lots of ideas about potential shape for a future litter project.
Lovely, thanks Caroline. Alice. If you're there, Alice, you're on mute. Hi.
Yeah, sorry, I am here. I was just changing all my buttons. So yeah, from our projects, we were working well on the right-hand side of the spectrum. We had the salt marsh restoration projects and Pacific oyster projects. So our main point that, it's difficult to find just one, but our main point was that we need to think a bit more strategically in how we can push and get better funding for these coordinated and co-delivered projects. So we're saying that instead of having many isolated local projects that work well on this, that we need to focus on coordinating more at a national level. And the way of doing this, we're thinking, would be really tying into the Environment Bill and the local nature recovery networks, and making sure that this includes intertidal habitats. And in that way, we'd be strategically aligning and tying into this, which would mean that we could access Section 106 funds, or whatever the new iteration of those is going to be called, in order to push forwards more co-delivered and co-created projects.
Brilliant, thanks Alice. And finally, Catherine.
So we had a similar discussion to it sounds like Amy's group. So it was all about, we thought the key was understanding all the different perspectives of the organisations. There was quite a bit of discussion about differences in timeframes. So like local NGOs are working to very short timeframes, whereas water companies have a years lead into things. So trying to get that understanding between all the different organisations. And one interesting point was that the situation with COVID means that a lot of the work is now happening online. But that's a real opportunity, because it means that your travel time is cut down so much that you've got the opportunity to feed in and meet a wider range of people that you wouldn't have been able to, just because you physically can't go to so many meetings and you've got budgets for travel. So that was a nice positive note to end on, something to take out of the current situation.
Great, thank you. Very well facilitated and kept to time. Thank you, everybody. Okay, so we've got 5 or so minutes now for, again, some open discussion or questions and answers. If the facilitators could stay on screen, and if you've got any questions, put your video on, put your hand up, and Amy's going to just chair final part of this feedback on the breakouts.
Okay, I can't see any immediate questions in the chat. So if you do have a question, please turn on your video and pose the question, and go off mute and pose your question to the rest of the group.
Don't be shy.
Oh, looks like we did a fantabulous job on explaining the collaborative spectrum. Oh, Emily.
Hello. Hi. What would you see the next steps from this then being going forward? As in, how do you see taking the information today and feeding it in going forward so we can kind of improve the lessons or discussion points that we've had?
So that's kind of a two-pronged answer to that. This will be feeding into the roadmap work that Natasha's leading on, and she's going to be going over that in a minute. But in terms of the wider, the Morecambe Bay pilot and the national project, we're very interested to pull together what the next phase will be. And originally we were thinking of taking the approach developed through the pilot and Morecambe Bay to look at how perhaps we could get resource and funding to replicate what we've done there in another space. And at the moment, we're still finishing out the collaborative side of the process with the Morecambe Bay pilot partners. We had a bit of a hiatus over the summer because of the world went crazy and furlough happened and such. So it has been a bit delayed, but we're now in a co-create phase where the partners are working together on ideas, and they've been learning about their strengths and opportunities and where their ambitions lie on what to work on. So we're just working through all of that now to enable them to work with them to help them co-create a nice project for the Morecambe Bay area that includes all the partners that they can co-deliver. So it'd be interesting to see what happens coming out of that process. And then there's the intention of having a national conference probably next spring, to bring the different regions together and have another conversation about what we found, what happened in the different interviews that Tash did for the roadmap, which we'll go on to in a minute. And then in the meantime, squirreling away in the background, trying to find the funds for the next phase of the project.
Okay, thank you.
I think stunned silence. Oh, Harvey.
I've got another one. Hi, Harvey from the Ribble Rivers Trust again. You've obviously been asking us for our ideas in terms of opportunities for the next 12 months, but what do the facilitators think are going to be some of the opportunities coming up over the next 12 months? And this, I don't know if anybody can answer this, but how can we still be heard amidst all the noise around COVID and the challenges in terms of, you know, working with more restricted circumstances and all of those sorts of challenges?
Would anybody else like to take that question out of the facilitators? Caroline?
There's one obvious thing that's come out of the COVID thing so far, and dealing with the impacts of COVID, is the horrendous increase of litter on the coast. Well, litter. But there are some really serious issues around the amount of plastics that are now being used and disposed, not in particularly good ways. And I think there may be opportunities for people to tap into some of the COVID recovery money to help deal with some of these issues, and at the same time continue to work on long-standing issues that we already had before. But you know, I think there are opportunities there if we think smartly about the way funding is going at the moment.
Just to add to that, there's real opportunities around really highlighting the fact that more and more people are trying to access the natural world for their health and well-being because of lockdown, and a large portion of those people are heading to the coasts, hence the litter problem. But I think there's a real opportunity to change the narrative around good custodianship, especially of our coastal spaces,
to highlight that this is, you know, the best, blue is best for health and well-being, but particularly mental health and well-being. And there are statistics already out from the tourism industry, from Natural England, from various academic institutions, really, you know, bringing all of this together and highlighting it. So staying on top of that conversation that's really gaining pace, I think, is a real opportunity for us all.
Amy, it's worth just mentioning the CABA Estuaries and Coast Working Group that you chair, I think, is one step for going forward.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a national CABA Estuaries and Coasts working group that I chair, and the CABA group facilitates and enables, so that forms part of that ecosystem of national support groups that CABA host. Also, some more recent news: the Coastal Partnership Network is providing the secretariat for a new coastal communities all-party parliamentary group, along with the Coastal Communities Alliance and the Local Government Association Coastal Special Interest Group. So there's a real opportunity there. There'll be an inquiry that we'll be leading early next year. So that's a real opportunity to get your ideas and your issues in front of the MPs that are a part of that group. Times they are changing. Lucy.
I was just going to pick up on the point about health and well-being as well from the catchment perspective, and sort of flag some work that Harvey and Rivers Trust have been involved in there, with Ellie Brown there. Data and evidence officers done some really fantastic work looking at health and well-being opportunities and issues in catchments that I think would be really valuable to people thinking about those issues and targeting those kind of projects. It's a great example to have a look at.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I think it's over to Lucy now.
All right, handing over to Lucy to share your presentation.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, thank you, everybody. And here's Tasha to take through the roadmap.
How you collaborate with your neighbouring partnerships to ensure upstream and downstream thinking. Or as a stakeholder, how you collaborate with others and work with the local coastal and catchment partnerships. I've been exploring ways in which catchment and coastal partnerships are working together through the WAMM project. This presentation will give you a flavour of how this work is progressing and where it's leading. And as it's nearly the end of the day and it's been quite an involved session on Zoom, I thought we'd have a little bit of music to keep us going, and see if you can tell me what this music is when we get to the end. With or without COVID, collaboration will still have to be at the heart of sustainable resource management. Your group today probably identified projects with various experiences of working with others, some constructive and successful, some challenging, and some with further potential. A delivery of future government policy, such as the 25-year Environment Plan, is likely to require more collaboration in a tougher economic climate. As our work with the collaborative spectrum illustrated, we need to do more than share information, but understand each other's perspectives in order to cooperate effectively and seek out opportunities for co-creation and co-delivery where it's appropriate. So the need is clear, particularly with the climate crisis, impending recession and green recovery. In my view, we need more focus on the coast. Current governance arrangements are complex across the land and sea. The Water Framework Directive gave us river basin districts and catchment partnerships focused on the terrestrial environment and fresh water quality. The Marine Strategy Framework Directive gave us marine regions at a large scale, with WFD taking priority in inshore waters, except for new indicators such as noise, litter and marine biodiversity. Marine plans are focused on the inshore and offshore development opportunities, but they have a lack of local delivery across the land-sea interface in perhaps the most complex zone. At the same time, the concept of partnership working across the land and sea has been exemplified by the catchment-based approach. Catchment partnerships evolved to support implementation of WFG and have demonstrated their value for money. CABA showed that for every £1 of public money invested, the reward was over 6 times the investment from non-government sources. Catchment partnerships have got full coverage across England, and most have operated now for around 10 years. There are 93 catchment partnerships, and 56 of them have coastal and estuarine components. Coastal and estuary partnerships have existed actually for longer than catchment partnerships, but have had a bit more of a bumpy ride. It was in the early 90s that English Nature started funding estuary strategies and estuary management plans with coordinators in local places. Then the European Integrated Coastal Zone Management recommendation led to a strategy for England's coast, and a flurry of activity which led to the formation of the Coastal Partnerships Network, and work attempting to demonstrate the value and benefit of working in partnership. More recently, Coastal Partnerships has supported the MMO in delivering marine plans in many parts of England, and they have very good knowledge of marine stakeholders. But I think there still remains a lack of proper focus on coastal planning. Essentially, coastal partnerships work in a very similar way to catchment partnerships, coordinating information, bringing decision makers together, involving communities, and identifying joint project opportunities. So I think there's an opportunity to link delivery for the lower catchment and inshore marine environment further through the work of coastal and catchment partnerships. The latest 2019-2020 review of coastal partnerships showed there are about 55 active partnerships that have existed for the last few decades, but over 80 different partnership initiatives working at the coast. The diversity of hosting arrangements, partners, size and focus has increased, and a small number have legal status as charities. Local authorities often play a key role in leading the partnership initiatives. One thing we found from recent research is that many of the coastal partnerships have become more marine. Devon Maritime Forum has existed for about 10 years now, Cornwall Maritime Strategy. The Dorset Coastal Forum was the first to pilot a marine plan process. And more recently, the Marine Pioneer projects, one of which based in North Devon, pioneered an approach for landscape and land-sea interface collaboration. So coastal partnerships are supporting marine planning and offering linkage to the offshore environment, and the potential for marine plan and development at sea to offer opportunities for coastal regeneration. But the local knowledge of these coastal partnerships is really what the MMO have utilised in the marine plan process, and we may eventually see the formation of marine partnerships to help deliver the marine strategy. But turning to the coastal and catchment partnerships, for South West England and North West England, most of the catchment partnerships have coastal estuarine components. As this diagram shows, across England there are 93 catchment partnerships, of which 56 have coastal estuarine components, all of them in the southwest. 9 of them have coast, and for the northwest River Basin District, of the 12 catchment partnerships, 10 have coast. The need for collaboration is obvious, and the potential for joint working is significant. The value of partnership working across catchment, coast and marine space was recognised over 5 years ago. In fact, Ed Maltby, who lives in the southwest on the estuary, is involved in our workshop today, and he set up a task group under the Natural Capital Initiative to explore wholescape thinking, which has led to the publication of guidance online which is available to us. And to some extent this was the origins of the WAMM project. So reflecting on the last year of the WAMM project and the regional workshops and survey work, for collaborative delivery is bringing together survey work from a recent, or this year's CABA survey. You may have noticed a few new questions in there about catchment partnerships and how they collaborate with coastal partnerships and coastal issues. And in parallel, a coastal partnerships network survey which asked the coastal partnerships about how they collaborate with their catchment. This is the last of a series of regional workshops where we've had breakout sessions and interaction between local partnerships, as you've done this afternoon. And out of that, there are some local case studies and interviews that have been done with catchment and coastal couplets, we've called them. So lots of information has been collected over the last year, and after this workshop, the roadmap for collaborative delivery will start to be collated. So what we've been exploring are these issues and how we can strengthen collaboration through enhancing capacity, expertise, looking at areas of focus, where there have been barriers and challenges, where there are evolving opportunities, the nature of working between the partnerships, and the governance arrangements and leadership. It's likely that there'll be various iterations of collaboration, and sharing experience across the country will help us move to positive collaborative relationships as much as we can. Alongside the WAMM project and with other research I've been involved in the last year, we've come up with a concept called the coastal-based approach, largely based on experience from the catchment-based approach, but on the basis that CABA works with primarily the terrestrial planning environment, and there is a lack of focus on the inshore, coastal and marine environment in terms of holistic thinking. Coastal-based approach would kind of bridge the gaps in two ways: in governance between marine and terrestrial planning, in joining up the delivery of WFD and MSFD, and in each of the networks operating at the coast, bringing different stakeholders together on an issue basis, rather than overall perspective. So in the grey boxes, we have existing networks that work in the coastal area, but they're focused on specific sites or specific purposes, rather than having a more sort of landscape scale approach to delivery. So CABA would cover this gap in the overlap by bringing real integration across the land and water. There's also a gap geographically in that coastal partnerships don't provide full coverage of the coast, as we've shown today. And because CABA has demonstrated through full coverage the proof of returns on investment, it makes sense that the partnership arrangements we have to date are expanded to cover the whole coast. So your work today, alongside insights from the WAMM project as a whole, will inform the development of a roadmap for further collaborative delivery. Potential issues for collaboration that may have arisen today from the southwest are coverage and filling gaps in Cornwall, for example the Fowl Estuary and the Camel Estuary, and maybe in North and West Somerset as well there's more potential for land-sea collaboration. The complexities of governance are shown in the southwest, particularly as we've got some very important national parks and the UNESCO biosphere where the pioneers have been working. We already have some strong governance arrangements, but it's looking at how they work for the coast across that land-sea area. Noting the value of local authority leadership that has led to a lot of the coastal partnerships we have today. So there are opportunities, and the roadmap will support ideas on how to realise them in areas, for example, like the West Dorset streams, the Cornish streams, and where the rivers in Cornwall feed into estuaries or straight into the coast, and in East Devon with bathing water improvements. But I look forward to exploring the results of the breakout sessions. I'm second guessing what might have come up today, so I look forward to looking at the results of the breakout sessions from this afternoon. So whether you're a partnership coordinator, the roadmap will illustrate how you can collaborate with your neighbouring partnerships through deeper upstream and downstream thinking, or as a stakeholder, how you collaborate with others and work with the local coastal and catchment partnerships to improve management. This presentation will give you a flavour of how this work is progressing and where it's leading, so thank you for listening. There's just one more fun exercise to round off the day. and the results will also feed into the roadmap. So you may have worked out by now that the music's from Blue Planet, and really just represents how, as people, we live on the land, but we all need to understand more about the sea, and Blue Planet obviously has been a major contribution to people getting a better understanding of the sea, but not necessarily the UK sea. We need to do more, I think, to give our people in this country an understanding of how special our own sea is, rather than the tropical waters of other countries. Anyway, I'm now handing over to Lucy from the Rivers Trust to take you through some voting to end this session. Alan Frampton has raised a hand, Lucy, so Alan, go ahead.
Yeah, so just a question for Natasha, just on obviously the CABA side of things, your sort of thoughts on timescales for maybe pushing out with that kind of thing. I'm quite involved in SMP groups, etc., and from that side of things, so I'd be quite interested in seeing that progressed.
Okay, great. Well, CABA is formative. We've only just established a steering group, and the Environment Agency, who are involved in the CABA Coastal Based Approach steering group, have put in a bid in the spending review round this autumn. So depending on how successful that is, it will get tracked sooner rather than later. We're soon to launch it as a concept and get some political traction behind it, but it is basically a kind of concept that hasn't really gone anywhere yet. But I thought it was important to put it into the presentation today from the roadmap, because there is a group of people that have been working on it for about a year, and I think it is very relevant to the roadmap for WAMM. So hopefully, in answer to your question, yeah, CABA will get some traction, and I think the link between that concept and the CaBA Estuaries and Coast working group going forward is really important to sharing lessons and getting progress.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions from anyone? Okay, well, the final voting session that Lucy's going to run now will give us a chance to capture a little bit more of your thoughts before we close the day. But that's probably the last from me. So thank you very much for your work in the breakout. So I look forward to analysing that alongside the same information we've got from the other regions. And then Rob will be back in touch with an indication of where the WAMM project goes from here, with the final outputs at the end of the day. Okay, so bye from me. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Natasha. And as she said, just to finish, we've just got a few interactive polling questions just to gather some more information to feed into the roadmap work, and also to sort of help guide us with developing future projects. So these are questions that we asked at the Northeast and Southeast workshop as well, so it'd just be good to be able to collate responses from people that are here today as well. So I'm going to launch the first question on Zoom now. You should see that come up on your screen, but sometimes people have some problems with it depending on the browser you're using. So if you've got any issues, I've posted a link to an online survey form that you can use instead. So the first question we've got is sort of leading on to some of the things we discussed in the breakout, just to see what people's main priorities for support would be moving forward. And you can select up to 3 answers on this. So I'll just give people a few minutes to fill those in and submit the answers. So the options we've got are support with partnership development and governance, more in-depth support to help develop collaborative Wholescape plans, support on policy and legislative issues, support with bid writing and funding, technical data and evidence support, support with networking and information sharing, so sort of organising more events like the one we've had today. And we've also got other options, so if there's something else, if you do select other, if you just could post some more details in the chat, that'd be really helpful. And I'll end the polling on that one now and share the results on the screen. So there we can see straight away the most significant answer that people have said they'd like support with is developing collaborative Wholescape plans, and also quite a lot of people reacting to having more support to help organise sort of networking and information sharing events. And then also quite a few people with technical data and evidence support and partnership development support. So that's really helpful feedback for us going forwards. So I'll just move on to our next question. So our next question is really to gather some information around what the priority issues are for your partnership in coastal and estuarine waters. And again, it's multiple choice. You can select up to 3 answers. So this is really just to gauge where the sort of priority issues are that might be good to focus. There's quite a few options on this one. So if you just scroll down to make sure you see all the options, and quite a lot of these we've touched on through the discussions today. So we've got nutrients, sediment, plastics, fisheries and barriers, road runoff, climate change, habitat restoration, coastal erosion, and we've got another category for other again. So again, if you select other, if you could just share any comments in the chat. Okay, so I'll share the results on those ones. So we can see there that a key priority issue is climate change, and this morning we did definitely have quite a lot of conversation in the chat and discussion around that that issue. So again, a key area to focus on there, followed by habitat restoration that could be particularly sort of interlinked with those issues on climate change, and also sort of nutrients coming out as a key issue for people in the northwest and southwest. So the third of our 4th questions is what technical support would be most helpful. So if you selected that in the first question, which sort of areas of technical support would be most helpful for you? And again, you can select up to 3 answers. So we've got support with the coastal data package that we presented this morning, support with evidence-based wholescape planning, ArcGIS Online and story maps, citizen science and monitoring, and then one element of that, the outfall safari training that Catherine mentioned in her presentation this morning. And again, we've got a category for other if there's anything that we haven't included on there that you'd be keen to see included. Okay, so just in terms of the last question, we've got a comment in the chat from Ross Brown that another important priority issue would be to have included in their water quality, shellfish waters and bathing waters. So we'll certainly make sure we capture that. So I'll just give you a few more moments before I end the polling for anybody to submit their last answers. Okay, so I'll end the polling and share the results. So that probably links back to the first question again. The strongest answer there is around evidence-based wholescapes planning. So I guess really sort of taking that next support from just providing data to how you use that to build the evidence and develop collaborative plans and actions. And also quite a lot of people asking for further support with ArcGIS Online, story maps and citizen science and monitoring. And then the final question that we've got for you really leads on from Natasha's presentation on the roadmap, which is what would be your top priority for improving collaboration between catchment and coast to support the wholescape approach. So just select one answer this time of your key top priority of the thing you think we could improve the most to improve collaboration. So we've got increasing capacity, increasing expertise, identifying areas of focus and joint issues, the nature of working between partnerships and organisations, governance arrangements and leadership for collaborative working. And again, we've got another category. And I'll end the polling and share the results on this one. And again, it's half of you have said identifying areas of focus and joint issues. So again, I think that leads with that sort of developing collaborative plans and evidence-based plans, and just more opportunity, I guess, for people to get together and understand what each other's issues and focus areas are, so you can sort of identify those opportunities for collaborative working. And also, I think this came out in the breakout discussions quite a lot, around the sort of lack of capacity for people to really be able to sort of invest and get involved in collaborative working. So if we could increase that, that would be beneficial. So thank you very much, everybody, for taking part in those polling questions. They'll be really valuable, the answers. We'll analyse that and include that in Natasha's work on the roadmap and developing future plans. So I'm now going to hand you over to Rob, who's just going to finish with some wrap up and final thoughts from the day.
Thanks, Lucy. It's getting late and we are diminishing in number, so I'll make this very quick. So thank you very much to everyone who's participated. It's been hopefully really helpful and informative day for you, but we really appreciate all the presenters and everyone who contributed to the afternoon session too. Hopefully we've got a lot of good ideas we can capture there. In terms of next steps for WAMM, we will be searching for new alternative funding sources, but prior to that, look out for the roadmap. This will be coming in the new year or thereabouts. There'll be a WAMM report capturing everything that we've undertaken on the project, and we haven't mentioned this so far today, but we plan a national event that'll probably be in springtime, so a workshop. It looks unfortunately as though that'll have to be online. We did want to meet face to face, but so be it. Just to say that if you're in a partnership, go and speak to the other guy, start a conversation, you know, explore where you can begin to collaborate and build on some of these ideas. And so with that, thank you very much again. And I think we'll call it a day there. Thanks.